Okay, I'll call this meeting of the Standing Committee on City Finance and Services to order. Madam Clerk, may we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Robson is not in the chamber. Councillor Louis is not in the chamber. Councillor Stevenson is not in the chamber. Councillor Deal? Present. Councillor Jang is on a leave of absence for personal business. Councillor Reimer? Councillor Meggs is in the chair. Councillor Ball is not in the chamber. Councillor Carr? Councillor Affleck? And Councillor DeGenova. You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thanks very much. As chair for this meeting, I'm suggesting for reports that have no speakers or consideration items, we adopt the recommendations collectively in a single motion, and that's the case. There are no speakers on item 4 on the agenda. Does any member wish to hold this report for debate, separate vote, or because of conflict of interest? No one? So we need a motion to adopt the recommendations contained in report number 1. Moved by Councillor Carr. All in favor, please show. Any opposed? The following have been approved on consent. 162 West 1st Avenue, the Arts Club of Vancouver Theatre Society, liquor primary license application, liquor establishment class 4, the Arts Club Theatre, live performance venue. We'll now consider those reports with presentation. Speakers are held for debate, separate vote, etc. And I have a couple of announcements regarding the agenda. The Oak Ridge Transit Center policy statement, which was item 2, was withdrawn at the request of staff. Regarding item number 1, removal of the George and Dunsmuir Viaducts, Council received a presentation on the matter at the regular council meeting yesterday and is hearing from speakers today. We have to end the meeting today at 6 p.m. For a number of reasons, including events that the mayor and others have committed to go to some time ago. And if we don't finish hearing from speakers on the removal of the viaducts item, we will reconvene on Tuesday, October 27th, 2015 at 4 p.m. to continue hearing from speakers. And I've done a bit of math with the list we now have, and it's my hope and expectation that we'll complete the item and vote on it at that time. Regarding item number 3, taxi service review and report back, Council also received a presentation at the regular council meeting yesterday and will be hearing from speakers on the matter at the reconvened meeting, which starts on Thursday, October 29th at 6 p.m. All of these changes were caused, for those who weren't here yesterday, by the decision of Metro Vancouver to hold its budget presentation this morning, which takes about half the council away, and if half stay, then the other half go as alternates. So council decided to change the schedule in this way to try to accommodate the Metro budget meeting. And it's been a complicated business. So we'll start with item 1 on the agenda. Each speaker, just to remind everyone, has 5 minutes. You may receive questions from councillors. You don't need to use the 5 minutes. You don't have to answer any questions. Because of the number of people speaking, I just encourage council to ask questions and maybe not do too much dialogue with speakers. 2 important speakers could not be here and have submitted their remarks to council by videotape. Larry Beasley, former city planner, Brett Todderan, his successor as a city planner. The clerks advised me that the rules don't permit those videos to be submitted and played, so my apologies to those 2 if they both are out of town and otherwise would have certainly submitted in person and did so when this matter was heard in 2013 very eloquently. So we're ready to go, and our first 2 speakers are chairs or representatives of our advisory committees at council. First is Tanya Paz. She's not able to be here? Okay. And Am Johal, who's vice chair of the Vancouver City Planning Commission. I see him arriving now. Welcome, Mr. Johal.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to address council. Our chair, Danielle Bauer, couldn't be here today, so I was asked to read out the letter from the commission. I do want to emphasize that these are the views of the commission as a whole and don't reflect my personal views. I will add some comments at the end that'll be coming directly from me. The Vancouver City Planning Commission has previously appeared before Mayor and Council on 2 occasions to express its support for the exploration of the replacement of the Georgia and Dunsmuir viaducts with ground level streets. We're here today to speak in support of the staff recommendation. While we are here today to speak in support of the staff recommendation, we'd also like to draw attention to some concerns voiced around the Commission's table. Number 1, public participation and engagement. Commissioners believe that a high level of robust, transparent public participation and the detailed planning for the next phase of the project will be essential to achieving the objectives of the new neighborhoods. The consultation program outlined in the staff report is to encompass the full range of interests that could be affected by the plan, with the objective that everyone potentially affected by or interested in decisions get a chance to have a say. This area is of citywide interest, and the consultation with those directly affected should be expanded to include broader engagement. To achieve that goal, we propose that the decision to remove the viaduct should lead to a robust public planning process to determine the form of the public engagement for the removal and site planning phase. There's room to consider models of participation and engagement in other cities, as well as lessons from other Vancouver planning processes. The Planning Commission is prepared to be a participant in this process, bringing its broader citywide perspective and long-term viewpoint to the discussions. Cost and public benefits. Cost estimates for large-scale projects are always uncertain, and financing the viaduct's removal plan is a complex challenge involving many players. In particular, we are concerned that amenities required by the new neighborhood may be compromised by using community amenities contributions from new development for street work, and also that cost overruns may be financed by increased density or reduced amenities. Detailed updates on costs and public benefits on a regular basis could help allay concerns and maintain public confidence in the project. Number 3, site planning. Raising the bar. A decision to remove the viaducts has the potential to transform the area and create substantial new development opportunities. We encourage the city to raise the bar on these sites beyond what the city is already doing, with further innovation on sustainability and support of the Green City goals, affordability and support of housing and the homelessness strategy, and urban design performance. This is an amazing opportunity to be innovative, both with regard to an open-ended and participatory process to determine what comes after a decision to remove the viaducts, and also with regard to the site. This is an opportunity to ask what kind of a legacy this project should create. Without a commitment to an innovative planning process that goes beyond rezoning, the legacy could be simply more of what we already have. Number 4, the SkyTrain guideway. Following removal of the viaducts, the SkyTrain guideway will become prominent as a viaduct and barrier in its own right. This presents an opportunity to invite ideas from citizens and community groups for the future of the guideway as a prominent feature in the newly exposed public realm. Before making the final decision on viaducts removal, it should be confirmed that the project cost estimate takes account of adjustments and retrofit to the guideway necessitated by the street work. In summary, the Planning Commission is in support of a decision to proceed with the removal of the viaducts and the implementation of the new street network in a process that is robust, transparent, and fully public. Those are the remarks from the letter that has already been sent to you. I just do want to take some of the remaining time to raise additional concerns which are coming from me personally rather than the Commission as a whole. I think you're going to hear from a number of speakers related to Hogan's Alley, the downtown east side, very real concerns about gentrification, the movement of capital through neighborhoods in Chinatown and Strathcona as well. I think the city needs to be much more proactive on the purchase of single resident occupancy hotel to protect the housing stock that is already under challenge, and there's some things that the city can do unilaterally by utilizing civic resources. I think that those concerns that are being raised in Chinatown, downtown east side, Strathcona are very, very real, and there needs to be broader public engagement and a real sense of what these neighborhoods stand to benefit from related to this project. And I think the concerns that people will be expressing from these groups should be taken very, very seriously by this council. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Johal. You have a question from Councillor Carr.
Mr. Chair, thanks so much, Mr. Johal, for coming and to the for the Vancouver Planning Commission for its submission. My question has to do with the first point. I wanted to be clear. It sounded to me like there was a sort of a two-phase stage of public consultation that was being asked for. One was a stage to actually determine the more robust planning that the Planning Commission recommends for what will happen to the area around the and under the viaducts. Is that correct, that there's a stage one where there's a robust discussion of how the planning, the consultation will take place, and then the actual consultation itself?
I think there was a number of drafts and discussions at the Planning Commission that included commissioners like Andy Yan, Neil Montaigne, Anthony Pearl from SFU Urban Studies, and I think certainly, I don't know if there were any specific recommendations, let's say, but we would be happy to continue the conversation with you and Councillor Reimer at the Planning Commission, where you both sit. I think there's a lot of open questions there that could be resolved.
Right. Okay, second question. Regarding the costs, it seems clear that the Planning Commission is recommending not using CACs, Community Amenity Contributions, to pay for the viaducts, correct? Was there any discussion at the Planning Commission? I wasn't there for this part of it, but was there any discussion about whether the sale of city land was supportable in terms of providing for revenue to use to pay for the viaducts removal?
I don't think there was a level of specificity. Those were sort of some of the concerns raised. They just wanted to see maximum possible transparency on the matters relating to the cost and public benefit calculations. It's obviously a complex process, but these were the kinds of questions that came up that also people were hearing from community groups as well.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mr. Johal. And thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Deal, who's liaison to the Active Transportation Committee, reminds me that a submission from that committee was sent around to council, and Ms. Paz couldn't be here, but the submission of the committee's in council's hands. So, next speaker is Mr. Peter Webb, Vice President of Concord Pacific.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'll probably answer some questions, I imagine, after this. I'll just read something into the record. In an effort to move forward with the completion of the development of the 1986 World Expo lands, Concord has engaged in the process of the viaduct study at the city's request. As a result, we have incurred over 2 years of additional delay in moving forward for good reason. The opportunity for city building we now face is a wonderful chance for Vancouver to fix an old problem and reconnect its communities. If Council elects to move forward and endorse the staff's recommendations for the removal of the viaducts, then Concord intends to submit an application for rezoning of our associated lands as soon as possible thereafter. This would include planning of the seawall and park, along with development lands and roadworks in order to realize on this city building opportunity and the associated master plan community. Not to mention delivery of the new Georgia Wharf about to become a new city focal point. A rezoning application by Concord Pacific will in fact be the critical process required to initiate complex negotiations between the city, the province, and Concord. This activity will resolve items such as CAC calculations, participation mortgage distributions, affordable housing solutions, and the like. And finally, this rezoning process will be the fastest way to deliver the expanded Creekside Park, along with the removal of the viaducts.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Any questions? Councillor Carr?
Thanks very much. Well, I'm very happy, thank you for being here. Very happy to hear you say that it's the fastest way to deliver the Creekside Park. We are hearing a lot about that. And I think there has been a desire amongst the residents to get some firm date around the completion of that park. The report talks about a expedited development of some or all, but do you have a sense of what that expedited timeline might be, and also for the completion, a timeline?
Well, I think the staff's report is fairly accurate on the suggested timelines, but there is a very long and arduous process to go through with the negotiations on CACs, the coordination of the master plan, community engagement in order to come up with the right plan, the right mix of housing typologies, non-market housing typologies, all of these things. So it is a very large, extensive master plan for a new community at the foot of Georgia Street. So I could see that taking a considerable amount of time. The intent, though, of Concord Pacific is if we can get over this hurdle, if council adopts this direction, we will engage immediately in the process, public engagement process, and immediately in the process of preparing rezoning applications. That's sort of the critical milestone to initiate the complex negotiations.
Okay, and you said that in the report staff are clear about a timeline. What's your interpretation of that timeline?
Well, I could imagine
in the report, that is.
I can't recall the exact dates in the report,
no.
but I can tell you that I can tell you that the process of coming up with a master plan in detail for a final conclusion that the public's all comfortable with, preparing those documents could take up to a year, and then a process of rezoning could take a year, and then there'd be a series of construction process for the removal of the viaducts and staging for that removal, which hasn't yet really been discussed, and all of the above. So
Yeah, okay.
the goal would be, even from Concord's perspective, would be to try to deliver as much of the park as early as possible in the new rezoning process. So this is a negotiation that would be instrumental in coming to an agreement before we actually get a rezoning.
Great, thank you. I do have another question related to the value of the property that you hold and the fact that with the removal of the viaducts and without any change in zoning, it's zoned currently for, certain height and density. Would you say that the viaducts removal just in and of themselves would increase the value of your property because of the freed up space, et cetera, would increase the value of your property, even if there were no increase in density?
I think that's a fair statement.
Right, okay.
I think it's increasing the value of the city of Vancouver.
Right, great, okay, thank you, I appreciate that. And my final question has to do with the seawall. There is a commitment of Concord Pacific around the seawall. Do you have a sense of the completion of that?
Actually, we've talked about this a little internally, and we would envision that the very first thing that would be implemented would be the seawall design as part of the initial process. So first part of the master planning to really advance in the rezoning process would be to get the seawall design resolved, maybe the Georgia Wharf design resolved, get that construction implemented while we continue with the public process and ultimately the viaducts removal. Right. So we see that as a fundamental part of the sort of community infrastructure as opposed to roadways infrastructure so that people can reconnect the north and south side of Falls Creek.
Mm. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Affleck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi. Councillor Carr addressed a couple of the issues, but one question, if we don't approve this, and we say no to taking the viaducts down, how does, and you're already behind 2 years because of waiting for us to make a decision on this, what's that scenario look like for you for development?
Well, you can imagine that Concord would be thinking long and hard about what would we do if the viaducts didn't come down and the land wasn't reconfigured. We went through a process some time ago, years, with the policy report that was established, that did establish, I think, about a 1.1 million foot density for our property that Concord did not endorse. It was a process really outside of the world of Concord Pacific that had happened within the city. And we get that that type of thing has to happen sometime, but Concord never endorsed that arrangement. So we would have to think about how we want to handle ourselves if the viaducts don't move forward as a removal project.
What does that mean?
We might make some other kind of rezoning application that may not match the policy report that's previously been adopted.
Okay. In the current report, and there are some concerns that we've heard about traffic and the added density down there, taking away the viaducts, obviously you're pulling traffic down into the, from a development point of view and a neighborhood point of view, what are your thoughts on that impact on increased traffic, coming down that hill and then dispersing at the bottom, and how that might affect getting in and out of the condo developments and
well,
park
we've
itself?
been convinced by the staff study. The jury was out for us as well as community members about whether or not this would be a viable effort. So when the discussion of delaying Concord's efforts to move forward in development came up about studying the viaducts, we had to think about that. And finally we gave our support of the study, but we didn't give our support of the removal of the viaducts. I think through the process of seeing the study, we're now seeing that that is a good move. We think it's a wise move for the city. We think the viaducts removal sort of justifies or legitimizes the concept that Georgia Street is our cultural corridor. It gives a Falls Creek opposite end to the Lost Lagoon end. We think that it becomes a fantastic opportunity to place make. So we think the Georgia Wharf is a fantastic idea. But with regards to the transit and circulation of roadways, we think the staff has done a good job in demonstrating that it is a viable solution. In fact, there's more volume capable in the area, while I think traffic may slow down 1 to 3 minutes from south to north into the city at some point, but with greater volume.
And getting in and out of those developments would be a challenge given the change in the park's shape and side streets?
I don't think the circulation in and out of the properties that are affected by the rerouting of the roads is worsened. I think the circulation of those properties is improved because of the width across the Pacific Boulevard frontage now there's two ways in and out, for example, on the property that would affect Concord Pacific.
The width of that, what would become the new Pacific Avenue is potentially 6 to 10, with the parking maybe 8 lanes wide. On the other side of in Yaletown, you have 5 lane. I guess it would be, depending on how you look at it, it's 4 to 5 lanes there. Does that affect? Does that worry you at all? That sort of size of roadway?
Yeah,
the kind of traffic that
we
will be
do
going
agree that every effort needs to be made to try to normalize the size and scale of Pacific Boulevard. We had, for 25 years, we've had the western end of Pacific Boulevard built out, and I think we all knew as it was being done that it seemed to be oversized. I mean, it was required for engineering purposes as a ring road, emergency services road, and so on. But I think over time, the city implemented traffic calming solutions to try, and curbside parallel parking to try to get that street normalized more. I think it's a lot better. And as we move forward with the west of, or the east of Canby portion of Pacific Boulevard, I think the goal would be to satisfy the traffic circulation, but also normalize the street. We've talked with planning a fair bit about this. We believe that curbside parking would be a sort of a fundamental requirement in that area in order for the commercial that we propose on Pacific Boulevard to have traction and take. You really need curbside parking to do it. However, the future long-term is that maybe there's not so many cars. So there's a bike lane that will be going in on both sides of Pacific Boulevard, I think, at that location.
But you still have Georgia Street coming down, which is a significant 4 to 5 lane road, 6 lanes coming down. Unlike, say, the western side of Yaletown, where you have Seymour, Richard, they're small streets. We have basically a 6 lane road heading down to another 6 lane road. Kind of feels like a highway when you put it in those terms.
Well, I don't know that I would call it a highway. I think it is a main event. I think there's a main event in George's, the ceremonial street, and the city can now land at Falls Creek in alignment with Science World. It can meet up with the ring road of Pacific Boulevard that serves the south and north sides of Falls Creek. So it is going to be a nodal point of scale. But the concept of creating density in the area and having curbside parking and even having Georgia Street ramp at a pedestrian and wheelchair level slope, I think it's at 4% or something, will create quite a normalized environment. And if we can get all those things working, I see, in fact, a commercial entertainment hub that relates to the arenas. We're planning, or the city is actually planning for us, that there should be over 200,000 feet of commercial in the Concord development, so that there's a strong several block placement of restaurants and service commercial.
Thanks, Councillor Affleck. Mayor Robertson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So everyone's used to all the development Concord's done along the North Shore of Falls Creek. It's obviously a much remarked upon part of our city, has drawn a lot of international attention and an important part of our downtown. And this is the last piece of the puzzle for Concord Pacific. Can you just speak to what your bigger vision of what this neighborhood looks and feels like compared to everything else you've built? Is it more of the same feel as what you've built to date? Is it a departure from that? Do you see it becoming a different type of neighborhood?
I guess I would have to say we see it as an evolution. I think around the world, Concord's development is now referenced as the model of Vancouverism. It's sort of taken on that name, a podium and tower, point tower kind of concept. And that served its purpose for 20 or 25 years. And we see the design and massing of buildings evolving, including Concord's new buildings are evolving into a different form. We see buildings that are more low and mid-rise, taking on unusual shapes and responding in different ways to the street and infrastructure in the area. So I don't see it as more of the same of the decades past for Concord Pacific. I see it as the new evolving types of designs. I think that the concept of Vancouverism really was about not so much the physical, it was about the concept of highly dense or reasonably dense urban mixed use, meaning that there's a lot of residents that live in the area that satisfy the jobs requirement and want to work downtown, so that supports office solutions. But then there's also the commercial services and restaurants that fill the streets. So that creates the active streets. I think the thing to remember about Concord is when we first built the first buildings along Pacific Boulevard and sold the commercial spaces at the bottom, everybody that came in wanted to be the same ice cream shop or travel agency, or there's a duplication going on. And we realized that That simply doesn't work. So Concord started to retain and manage the commercial spaces so that we could place users into the commercial spaces and enhance the communities and to get the neighborhoods to feel more traction. Now that both sides of Pacific Boulevard are built and all of that residential density is there, I think we all recognize that there's vibrant communities that have been created at the Roundhouse and now the Creekside area and the far end down by the Granville Bridge, the west end of the project. But so it would be an evolved version.
An evolved version, would you say, when you look at this and you've got projects around the world in different places, is this piece, maybe where does it fit on your radar as in importance? Is this, do you want to do something big? Is something that is world class, or are you just finishing up the job?
No, this is it. This is our, this will define the evolution of Concord as well, and how we've become more creative in our thinking and how we place people and work and jobs into the same environment. I think that this originally was the back eddy of the Concord Pacific development, the Expo lands. It was the part that nobody looked at. It was in the east, and it's actually now, if this goes forward, it's about to actually become the front door. This will be the best part of Concord Pacific, practically, purposely. The Georgia Street coming to grade at the Pacific Boulevard will be a showstopper for the city of Vancouver. I think this is sort of an international scale focal point that when you come to Vancouver, you would potentially talk about Grouse Mountain and Granville Island and Stanley Park and Georgia Wharf. And you would take people down there to near the arenas to enjoy that space. This is a really big deal for Concord Pacific. That's actually why Concord's been able to take time and think it through and decide when to move and what would be the best thing for the city, we believe, too.
So that has a ring of legacy to it in terms of your work here in the city. And I'm curious, the flashpoints we have right now with affordability, with park space always in demand in our downtown in particular. Do you see this as legacy opportunity to include measures of affordability and have park space that's truly...
Yes, absolutely. All the issues have to be addressed. We understand that. We don't see this as a highly exclusive neighborhood that we just sell for a fortune and wander off. We understand the affordability of housing, the parks and community uses in an area, daycare, schools, seawalls, parks. All of those things are important parts of the development. And we recognize that in the rezoning process, we'll have to address all of those topics together with the city in a sort of a partnership way. Because right now, at this stage that we're talking about, this is not a Concord master plan development. This is the city deciding what's best for this end of False Creek. And what we've done is read your report, and we actually support it. We think it's very good planning.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Robertson. Thank you, Mr. Webb. That's all your questions.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mr. Charles Gauthier. Welcome, Mr. Gauthier.
Good afternoon. In a unanimous decision by its board of directors, the Downtown Vancouver Business Improvement Association supports the City of Vancouver's staff recommendation to City Council to remove the Dunsmuir and Georgia Street viaducts. More specifically, we support the replacement of the viaducts with a new bi-directional 4-lane Georgia Street that would connect the eastern edge of the downtown to Pacific Boulevard. And we support the construction of a new active transportation bridge to facilitate the movement of pedestrians and cyclists from and to downtown along Dunsmuir Street. Based on input from our membership and results of the city's planning analysis and consultation, we believe replacement of the viaducts is the next evolution in making downtown more easily accessible by all modes of transportation. We believe that making downtown's edges more permeable is a transformative step in connecting the central business district with its surrounding neighborhoods. We do not believe the estimated increase in travel times from 1 to 3 minutes will have a negative impact on accessing downtown by vehicle traffic. And we also believe that the significant change in infrastructure will accelerate the city's 2040 transportation plan initiatives to increase mode share, in particular for cycling and walking, both important to a vibrant and healthy downtown. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Gauthier. No questions? Councillor Affleck? It's okay, Councillor Affleck cropped up. He beat you to it, Councillor Carr. It doesn't happen often, but sometimes.
I know, I don't know what to do. I'm shocked here. Yeah.
Okay, it's all yours,
Thank you,
Councillor Affleck.
Mr. Chair. The BIA, your BIA, what's the boundaries of it? How close does it get to this neighborhood? Is it in this neighborhood?
We're within a couple of blocks of that particular point,
So not yet in it.
but it affects our members in terms
Yeah.
of access into the downtown.
That was my next question. Your membership, I'm not sure if you have this kind of data, how many of them live in the city and how many of them live outside of the city? No,
We don't collect that information. But certainly, issues of accessibility into the downtown, travel times, issues of congestion, on-street parking availability, off-street parking availability, cost of both of those, are issues of concern not only to our members, but to customers who come downtown.
Well, in effect, it appears that Dunsmuir becomes sort of a dead-end road. It kind of becomes a bike lane, basically. And so I guess there's not a lot of retail along Dunsmuir for you guys on that end, really?
Yeah, there isn't a lot, and certainly I think one of the options is that there's consideration to making a segment of Dunsmuir Street at the eastern edge two-way, which I think would certainly help with the circulation in that neighborhood, which I think, we would need to look at that in more
Like
detail.
Granville, or how far over do you think?
Well, closer to where the viaducts currently are. I think that we would certainly need to be consulted on how far, but I think in the report it does specify that it wouldn't go extensively into the central business district. It would remain a one-way street for most of the way. And again, we would need further discussions with city staff on that.
Any idea what impact it would have on your association as far as some of the commercial development? There's already a lot of it planned for that neighborhood, but does that come into your BIA as part of your membership, or is it outside that? And it would have to, you'd have to change your boundaries to get them in?
Yeah, I don't see how it would impact commercial development if the viaducts are there or not. We had plenty of time to consult our members on this. We went to two of our committees. Our board of directors delved into this in quite a bit of detail. There didn't seem to be any concerns raised at that point, and we have both building owners and tenants that are both on our committees and the board. So we thought that we had a good sample group to solicit feedback. And had you asked this question 2 years ago, we had more concerns than we do now. So much so that we're prepared to stand up and say that we support this proposal.
So you don't poll, you sort of have your board of directors and your committees, and they reflect, their job is to reflect what the members feel.
That's correct.
No polling that you do.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Carr.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks so much for coming and bringing the views of your organization. I'm wondering if the Downtown Vancouver Business Improvement Association has had conversations with the suppliers to your members. So, for example, the food suppliers to restaurants, the suppliers to the hotels, and whether or not and does your decision, if so, reflect any concerns that may have arisen from the supplier's point of view of being able to quickly access downtown and get back? Many of them are in the Falls Creek Flats, or certainly east, and whether or not those concerns have been talked over.
We didn't speak directly to the suppliers, but again, on our committees and the board of directors, we have restaurants, all different kinds of businesses that represent our membership. And that was flagged if that was a particular issue, and it didn't raise any concerns amongst those on our committees or the board of directors.
It's good to hear.
Yes, and I believe, I won't specifically, but I believe that certain associations representing suppliers had been approached and consulted. Mm-hmm. I thought that was in the report.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. I just was wondering from your...
We didn't do that.
Great. Okay. Thanks very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeGenova.
Thank you very much for coming. I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked of staff, but from a different perspective. During construction, we've seen large construction projects on our streets, and that sometimes that can be damaging to businesses. Throughout the process, as I don't really have a timeline yet on how long the deconstruction would take, is there any apprehension around any of the businesses that you represent that during construction there may be some issues for?
The short answer is yes. We'd would want to be consulted on what mitigation strategies would be in place, and communications and the scheduling. We've had quite a bit of experience with that. Granville Street redesign construction that occurred leading up to 2010 Winter Olympics, completed about a month prior to the Olympics happening, and the Canada Line construction. So we've been there, done that, but we have worked with city staff, especially on the Granville Street project, where we try to find ways to mitigate any negative impacts on the businesses. So we have some great examples of what was done properly and how to mitigate those impacts, and certainly lessons that we've learned on how we can do things better. So certainly we would want to be involved in those discussions with city staff at the appropriate time. But just like a renovation in the house, it's disruptive. Construction is going to be disruptive, but we have to find ways to mitigate those negative impacts.
Okay, and just to follow up to that, have you to date been contacted as an association regarding consultation in moving forward with the report, or is this something that you would look to, I suppose, as the next step? I'm just trying to gauge whether or not you have already given some feedback and input to staff.
If you're asking regarding the construction
The
plan,
well,
no,
construction, deconstruction, whatever we'd like to call it.
not at that part. Our focus has been on the report, ensuring that our two committees and our membership was apprised of what the implications would be. We had two separate meetings with city staff during the summer months on the report, provided an opportunity for our committee members, our board members to bring up any concerns, have questions answered, which then led to our policy position, which I've delivered today.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you, Councillor Deal.
Thanks very much, and thanks for coming out today, Mr. Gauthier. This is a very large endorsement, and I know it's in your media release, but can you remind us how many businesses you represent, and then with each of those businesses, clientele, just give us a sense of the depth and breadth of who you represent with this endorsement today.
So we represent 90 blocks of the downtown peninsula, so right in the dead center, the central business district and the downtown south area. And in that area, there's 9,000 businesses and 900 plus building owners. And again, we would have made them aware of this issue over the course of the last couple of years. And through both our committee structure and our board structure, we have representation from both those groups, building owners and tenants. And many of our board members are prominently displayed on our list of the organization. And Cadillac Fairview, name dropping here, Oxford Properties. I mean, they're at the table and they would look at this, with a very close eye in terms of how it would impact their properties.
So it would also be people like the offices and you've got all kinds of different types of businesses and assumedly if they come to your table with a vote of yes, then they're representing, again, the suppliers, the clients, the clientele. And
yeah, they're going to have that lens of, how is it going to impact our particular business, and then how is it going to impact visitations to the downtown. And again, we look at that extremely closely because we do know, based on surveys that we've done in the past, that consumers will give consideration to not coming downtown like they would any other destination if it's going to mean getting caught in traffic. So we pay particular attention to that, and that's where, in the original meetings with city staff, we would have asked questions about how would this impact travel time into the downtown, how much capacity do the viaducts currently have, how much traffic do they bring in. We were all pleasantly surprised by the fact that it's, in the range of 10% of carrying the volumes into and out of the downtown along the viaducts. We thought that number would be considerably higher. Yep. So that, for us, kind of helped get us to the point where we are today to say we support this.
Good, thanks. And just one final thing. I know that we've worked closely together on other transportation issues downtown, and I've watched the DVBIA do a lot of work and a lot of research, and in fact, amend their opinions of things based on their learnings. So based on what you just said, it sounds like there was a good deal of research that went into this decision.
Yes, and I've been here before representing the organization where we had concerns about reallocating lanes on the Broad Street Bridge.
Exactly.
And, as we move forward with these initiatives, we realize that people are making other decisions in terms of how they get downtown if they're available, and they're walking and they're biking and they're using transit. And none of that appears to have a negative impact on the visitations to downtown. People are still coming downtown. It's still a popular destination. So we are evolving, and especially in a report that's going to be released soon regarding our Reimagine Downtown Vancouver campaign, there'll be probably more movement of the organization to these types of initiatives in terms of more greenways and more bikeways, because this is what people are asking for, and that's what we heard through our consultation process.
We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Gauthier. That's all your questions. Our next speaker is Stephanie Allen.
Hello.
Hi, Ms. Allen.
Hi there. Today, Your Worship, you and Council are here to decide on action. Action that will impact many in Vancouver and will impact the region. But in so doing, I offer that consideration must be given to other actions taken by the City of Vancouver in the not too distant past. I'm speaking about how the city displaced the Black Strathcona neighborhood, referred to as Hogan's Alley, in order to situate the current viaducts. If you decide to remove the viaducts, you have an obligation to address past unjust actions taken by former council and staff by pursuing policies and action that will seek to bring restoration and regeneration in this place. This is your chance to not only acknowledge past dislocation and exclusion, but to see to it that the Black community that was displaced and the subsequent generations who have been impacted by that loss are thoughtfully consulted with the purpose of reestablishing a place for Vancouver's Black community. A bit of history to remind us all of what happened. The National Housing Act of 1956 promoted urban renewal, which involved the public acquisition and clearance of privately owned property through the power of eminent domain to support economic growth and commercial interests. Consideration was not given to the human, social, or cultural significance that was contained in such buildings, nor was the lasting impact of those affected. In 1957, the city's planning department published the Vancouver Redevelopment Study. It was meant as a tool to guide the urban renewal efforts. The study mapped blight in the city and proposed one of two solutions: clearance or rehabilitation and conservation. For decades, the city had spent little to no money on infrastructure in the area. The streets, landscaping, and sidewalks had fallen into disrepair, and the threat of expropriation loomed on the horizon for the community. Thus, the blight that occurred can be traced back in part to city actions. In the study, the area occupied by the Black community was identified as being of first priority for removal due to the severity of blight. To quote from page 59 of the study, "The Negro population, while numerically small, is probably a large proportion of the total Negro population in Vancouver. Their choice in this area is partly its proximity to the railroads, where many of them are employed, partly its cheapness, and partly the fact that it is traditionally the home of many non-white groups. The disruption of accustomed social arrangements, which is an inevitable concomitant of relocation, is bound to create special problems for these minority groups. It is therefore important that the relocation program should be flexible enough to allow members of the same ethnic group to remain together, while at the same time discouraging the formation of ethnic enclaves." Now, this is a curious statement that leaves us probably with more questions than answers. But what is quite clear is that the disruption that would happen to the so-called Negro population was known, that it would cause special problems, and that these folks should be discouraged from forming other ethnic enclaves. Urban renewal policies of times past has been equated with colonialism in its success at destabilizing, dismantling, and erasing communities. Now we ask ourselves what can be done now. Perhaps we start by asking what was lost. What would have happened if, like other cultural communities of this city, the Black residents had been allowed to maintain that space, to remain, to grow, and to thrive? A treasure of art, culture, music, enterprise, social networks, faith groups, and families that were never allowed to reach their potential, nor contribute to the mosaic of urban Vancouver. Just cities are not to be citadels of exclusivity, but should facilitate the opportunity for people of all income levels, ethnicities, and educational backgrounds, social groups, and ages to take residence. Policymakers can do this by ensuring that city actions provide benefits in greater proportion to human capital than hard capital. And I say this as a developer myself. Mayor, council, and staff, this is within your power to provide. I offer that you should you decide to remove the viaducts, the city should facilitate a collaborative consultation with past Hogan's Alley residents, their descendants, and the greater Black community to work on a plan that will restore and regenerate what was lost, to bring justice to past injustice, and that these efforts result in space. Space for the Black community to live and play and raise families again, to work and engage in social networking, enterprise, space that nurtures art, culture, and allows space for the Black community to pursue their future within the greater Vancouver landscape. Please consider this as you move forward, should the viaducts be removed. As it is true for council and staff in times past, it is also true for you today. Your actions will be the legacy, but it will also become our legacy. And we will share that because we all share the city. Thank you.
Perfectly timed, Ms. Allen. You have some questions. First from Councillor Deal.
Okay.
Oh, that's hang over. Councillor Ball.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming, Ms. Allen. Thank you. You spoke eloquently, and we very much appreciate your message. Yesterday, I did bring the issues up of the lost African Canadian community, the Black community in that area, and was assured by staff that they would be addressing the issues in the neighborhood and trying to regenerate it once we move forward with the actual change in the physical neighborhood. But I'm interested in knowing, because you mentioned collaborative consultations, and by that I'm presume you mean meaningful consultations that result in an action. Could you just give us a little idea what your vision of what that would mean?
Sure. I really think there's a lot of perspectives that can be included in voices. There's a community, however, that was dispersed. So it takes some effort to find folks that have been impacted by this. But I would offer that even as a recent migrant to the city of Vancouver, who considers myself a part of the Black community, there was something lost in that sense of landing place for those of us who connect socially and culturally. And perhaps there's an opportunity, as I said, where it's discussions with former residents, their descendants, and greater Black associations and community members to talk about what spatial recognition could be made, whether it's arts, culture, affordable housing, things for immigrant communities who are newly settling to the city. I think there's a lot of opportunity for that dialogue to trace quite a few different paths.
Writing as fast as I can. Thank you again. Thank you for being here. Hopefully we'll be able to make something happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ball. Councillor Carr. Sorry, there we go.
Chair, and thank you so much for coming. I want to be very clear about what your request is to us. So I heard a request about consultation itself with people who did live in Hogan's Alley, their families, the Black community within Vancouver. Is that one piece of it?
Correct.
Okay. And then you asked about, I think your words were, need a space to live. And did you envision that in that space, like if the viaducts are removed and there is space freed up, is it a reestablishment of a neighborhood that has, as I think you mentioned, affordable housing or arts and culture opportunities in that area or somewhere else in Vancouver, or just the discussion to happen about where it could be? I'm unclear about that.
Sure. I think what I'm speaking about is that when you look at certain policies around the world that address restorative justice, it's about talking about what was lost and then what could be achieved in the new. I don't think it's about recreation. But I think it's about addressing that there were businesses here, there were jobs, there were homes, there was a Black-owned church. There was space for all of these things to occur because they don't occur on public sidewalks and parks. Although cultural, of course, celebrations can occur in public spaces. I think that that's where the dialogue should go, and that that consultation should really look at what happened and then what could be in this new future.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. I guess the clerk has your email and contact numbers if we want to get back to you.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks very much. Oh, Mayor Robertson has a question for you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you being here, and we've definitely had lots of advocacy, lots of voice from the Black community here in Vancouver, and there's lots of efforts have been made with Black History Month in particular to talk about Hogan's Alley and what was lost, and I'm hopeful there's a really robust community effort that's part of this and reshaping it. And I'm curious if your connection to that is more, maybe going off of Councillor Carr's points, is it more public space oriented and like turning the Jimi Hendrix shrine into a proper park or shrine, or are you thinking more with the actual building space, the built form that's there, or is this a wide open opportunity that you think?
Yeah,
we're
I
still
think that
early
I would
stage?
never hope to speak for an entire community. However, I think that, like I said, there were spatial losses. There were families that lived here and went to school here. There were businesses that employed other people. So I think that it's an all-encompassing, holistic look when you talk about community and what community really means. We all live in communities. They have significance to us. And when they're lost, there's a lot that is lost. So I think when we talk about moving forward, it is really, I mean, let's celebrate arts and culture, but let's also talk about the fact that people lived here.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for
Thank
being
you.
here.
Yeah, thanks again for your submission. Daniel Seagay. Is Mr. Seagay here? Daniel Seagay? Oh, I think he's coming. Yep.
Everybody. Hello. First off, thank you for having this discussion. I would like to acknowledge, excuse me, I have a cold, so please bear with me. I would like to acknowledge that we are on unceded Coast Salish territories on the lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And this is important always, but I think it's particularly important today, considering that we are talking about the history of displacement of racialized communities. So I would like to echo a lot of what Stephanie said. Stephanie, you did a great job of laying out the history of Hogan Alley's removal and the dispersal of African people from the Strathcona area. I would like to highlight a few things. So, you know, without getting too precise, there was a process beginning.
Mr. Seagay, you're a bit too close to the mic, so you can just step back. It'll get you great, and it's muffling you a bit as it is.
So beginning as early as something like the 1920s, there has been a concerted political project of urban renewal, sometimes disparagingly called slum clearance. Hogan's Alley was often depicted as a slum, whether in city reports or in the media. There were, you know, efforts to really highlight things like whatever immoral actions, as the media would call them, in order to legitimize the removal of the black community. And the reason for that was because that land was pretty valuable, considering its proximity to downtown, to the industrial waterfront. This was very valuable land. And this was land that was poised for development, real estate development. For instance, there was a Project 200, which came about in the 1960s. Ultimately, it wasn't put forward, but the idea was they needed to remove both the Chinese and the black community in order to profit off this incredibly valuable land. And they did that. And the African community slowly started dispersing itself, even before, I don't think it's really been discussed so far, but there was the plan to put a freeway through Strathcona, which was ultimately stopped, and that's why we have just the viaduct. But yeah, in that context, the black community dispersed, very aware that the freeway was either going to go through or the viaducts were right atop of Hogan's Alley. So what I want to talk about, though, is the connection between the past and the present. So just as in the past, the city facilitated developers, the project of developers, and helped remove black people in Hogan's Alley, the city is essentially doing the same thing today. I understand that there's this claim that the viaducts were a mistake, and that in order to correct that mistake, we need to take the viaducts down. but the reality is that we're simply repeating the same mistake. Jeff Meggs, I know you wrote a blog post the other day saying that with this land available, with the viaducts removed, there would be room for affordable housing. Now, the reality is that that land will be, from what I understand in the city staff report, will be going to market units, affordable housing, and condo development. And in light of the fact that definitions for affordable housing have been weakened so much, the reality is that people will simply not be able to afford living in their own communities. So to me, it looks like we're repeating the past. People are being priced out. Gentrification is rampant, and we're facilitating it. And you know, I think if we really want to honor the legacy of Hogan's Alley, we've got to not only create whatever cultural institutions or shrines or this or that, but actually stop the process which dispersed Black people in Hogan's Alley and which will continue to disperse racialized communities, this time people in Chinatown. Thank you.
You have a question from Councilor DiGenova, but you're out of your own time.
Okay, yeah, so my question is, or my ask really is that you delay action on this until there is some kind of concrete assessment of the effect of gentrification on residents in the area.
Okay, Councilor DiGenova.
Thank you very much for coming and for sharing the historical background and information as to why you're here. And your points are a little bit different than the speaker before you, although some of the historical context that you shared was the same. So my question to you is, you had just sort of answered a part of it in your last few sentences there, that you think that this should be delayed and that we should look at the effects of gentrification. But what is your biggest concern if the viaducts were to be taken down? What is your biggest concern other than the affordable, or as you're saying, it could be unaffordable housing that will be built there? Is there any way you could see to sort of move forward with some of the previous speakers' comments and finding ways to engage a community that may feel that it was pushed out during the original building of the viaducts?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that those two positions can be reconciled, that they're not in conflict. So we can have that community engagement and creating whatever cultural buildings or programs that we might want to have. But really, at the end of the day, to me, the most important thing is the affordability issue, the fact that condo development in that area will push up rents everywhere, or especially near that area. And that's not only a problem in and of itself, but it really essentially repeats the same mistake that we're supposed to be here to address.
Thank you. One last question is, do you feel that there is a way that, you know, we had some discussions, as the mayor had said, you know, through Black History Month, we've honored and talked a lot about Hogan's Alley. Do you feel that with the viaducts, if the viaducts were to remain, there's any way that you would like to see sort of that Black community honored for sort of the historical context in which the viaducts had, as you had mentioned, pushed them out?
I don't really have a position on that. I mean, if the community, if there is a community, it's dispersed. But if people get together and they come up with something, I'm whatever people come up with, I'm for.
Okay. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks.
Oh, Mr. Siga, you still got more questions. Councillor Ball.
I think you just answered my question, which was you don't have a specific ask, but you want whatever celebration or recognition, or you're okay with whatever it is as long as it's happening. Is that what you said? Yeah.
And I want to reiterate that that's one part. To me, the more fundamental issue is affordability,
Right.
And the reality of people being displaced.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
Councillor Carr.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for coming, Mr. Sege. I, too, am just seeking clarification, and I heard that you want something that honors the legacy of Hogan's Alley, but secondly, an assessment of the impact of removing the viaducts and the subsequent development on the current residents, i.e. whether or not gentrification would happen and how to mitigate that. But also I heard that you're interested in is assuring that there is a commitment to provide truly affordable housing in the housing that is developed there. Am I correct in
Right.
those
Yeah.
points? Okay.
I mean, as I said, in light of the definitions, the new definitions of affordable housing, it's not affordable for people, for really a lot of working class people, but especially
I'm
people
well
in
aware.
that area.
Yes, it's really market, yes.
Mm.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. That's all your questions. Our next speaker is Pete Fry. Here comes Mr. Fry. Welcome.
Hi, folks. Nice to be here. Feels like a bit of deja vu. First off, I would like to thank staff, actually. Thank you for taking the time to work with the community, listen to our concerns. We really appreciate the time that you've given to that. Now, that being said, I'm afraid that we don't feel that this proposal goes far enough to address our community's concerns that we were here earlier outlining back in 2013, 2012. Yeah, I think it was 2012. So specifically, item H in the recommendations, which actually severs the whole Prior Street argument from the viaducts removal. So item H, for you who don't have it in front of you, that council approved the downgrading of Prior Street to a local serving street upon completion of a new east-west arterial alignment to be determined through the Falls Creek Flats planning process. So therein lies the rub, the fact that we are deferring this to a future planning process that's yet to be completed. So that is fundamentally the concern with the community. We want to see Prior Street explicitly tied to viaducts removal. As it stands, the specific creation of a new east-west arterial to replace Prior Street just doesn't have any gravitas because it's attached to a future incomplete plan. Now, Jerry very clearly did provide us with a verbal commitment to that, and we appreciate that. We just want to see it actually applied to this plan in hard writing. Now, I appreciate that with the new federal government, and thank you that we have a new federal government, no more Stephen Harper, that there is infrastructure spending coming to our city. A little concerned that I heard on the radio the other day that the city's earmarking that first and foremost as a Broadway subway thing, and we'd really like to see some commitment to that federal infrastructure money coming towards the new future arterial to replace Prior Street. I note that actually John Mackey's article in the Vancouver Sun yesterday mentioned $100 million in potential windfalls from the CACs, so that would theoretically cover the cost of the proposed new connector, which I believe was $100 million as well. So really, this is what we've been asking for all along, is a really clear commitment to replacing that as part of the viaducts removal. We still have all sorts of questions. This has been the ask from the downtown east side, from Grandview Woodland, from Chinatown, from Falls Creek, from Strathcona for a while now. We really need clear direction on how the traffic's going to be managed east of Main Street. We do appreciate that with 2.5 million square feet of retail and commercial and residential development, 4,000 new residents, there's got to be, and of course, an increased road capacity for the New Pacific, that there will be an increase in traffic. And I appreciate the metrics that the city has provided us so far, but we've also heard conflicting stuff from Ian Adams, the former city transportation engineer. So it does leave us with concerns. And again, we want to see that. And we do have a relatively simple solution in the amendment that could be made to the existing recommendations that could address our concerns. I would note, too, that congestion in and of itself, I know often that's the metric that's applied, that's not our key concern. It's actually safety. So, even in the absence of extreme congestion, it opens up Prior Street, which was never designed to be that kind of volume or that kind of a road. It opens it up to more speed. If we have less congestion, then we have more speed. So it's kind of a damned if we do, damned if we don't. The Prior Street in-service road review, which you have received, we appreciate the intent behind that. We do highlight that while it wasn't an optimal from a user experience perspective, there's nothing inherent in the engineering design or operation of this street which would be considered a safety concern that merited immediate rectification. I do take issue with that statement in the executive summary because, in fact, we do feel that there is a fundamental issue with that street. And ironically, what got me into this in the first place was when I lost a personal friend on Prior Street, hit by a car a block from his home. He spent the last 6 years with a severe brain injury and just passed away this August. So every day I cross Prior Street and I think about that statement, and it really actually kind of deeply offends me because it is an inherently dangerous street. And I think the metrics that you applied in the road safety audit failed to address the actual concerns that might mitigate why people don't use that street as a vulnerable population, which is identified in the report. We don't actually talk about, we talk about the metrics of cars, we talk about the volume, the speeds, but we don't talk about the pedestrians, and we have no comparison. When we compare it to other comparable streets, we're not talking about the vulnerable users. We don't identify the pedestrians that use that street. Lastly, there's just a couple of secondary issues. I would like to highlight that first and foremost, the Prior Street is the fundamental issue that we're concerned about in Strathcona and in Grandview Woodland. But I am concerned a little bit with the delivery of social housing as proposed in this. I feel that there's not a really concrete commitment to that social housing. I appreciate that you have a bit of a shell game going on with the province, but I worry that in the assumption that you're going to get the density transfers for Concord Pacific and then get the money kicked back from the province is a pretty big leap. Lastly, I'm concerned about the idea of selling off public land, the city-owned properties. I know Mukhtar Latif, if he's here, has done a lot of work in London on public land trusts. I think that would be an option to pursue for leasehold land and to ensure that we have public and social housing for Vancouverites. We have a lot of pressure in the downtown east side and Chinatown right now, and it would be a great step forward to address that. I could go on, but I'm apparently out of time. I would actually also like to just mention
Councillor Carr has a question for you.
All right.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Thanks for being here, Mr. Fry. So I want to start by a statement you made sort of in the middle of, you said, an amendment we would propose would actually deal with our concerns. What was that amendment?
Yeah, absolutely. So in recommendation I, which reads that the passage of recommendations B through G, if you change that to include the passage of recommendations B through H, and that would actually kind of address our concerns in a nutshell, because that then ties the viaducts removal to an appropriate plan for Prior Street replacement.
Oh, interesting. Thank you.
The way I see it, I mean.
Okay, I will certainly bring that up with staff.
Thank you.
And in terms of the, I did raise some questions with staff when we had the report presented to us, and I'm interested in your response to the issue of what happens to Prior Street during the phase of, if this plan goes ahead, the deconstruction of the viaducts and the reconstruction of a new road system. I mean, what is your vision as someone in the neighborhood of what would happen on Prior Street?
Well, I mean, you know, Mr. Doblavoni and staff have actually proposed some concrete immediate rectifications to Prior Street, which we do appreciate. That being said, we're not really sure. I mean, it's a bit of an open question. I would imagine that traffic in general might decrease during the viaducts removal. Our concern is long-term, obviously. That said, I mean, our future vision, we'd like to see it calmed, probably I know there's been some concerns about retaining the transit route that's there because it's a safe, accessible transit route, and I did have an opportunity to speak to somebody about TransLink, and he said that that probably would be the case, that it would be an appropriate transit route despite a new Malcolm connector. But I think we just really want to see some certainty about replacing that arterial as part of viaducts removal, because what we don't want to end up with is seeing the viaducts come down, the new Great Pacific Boulevard then abut and connect to Prior Street as it is now. I know that there's a lot of pressure with the hospital coming and the need to remove that at-grade crossing and to expand the ports. So I think it's doable, and hopefully with our new federal government that infrastructure money is forthcoming. So I would love to see this just sort of immediately applied to this plan, and I think it would make the community, it would give us a great sense of relief to know that that is being connected. Because the concern, of course, is that the flats plan is not happened yet. So.
Right. Okay, I will raise that with staff. You also talked about the sale of public land. There's the two blocks, the public land, i.e. the city land that's been identified in this report, have the two blocks that are towards Prior, right? Yeah. So they on either side of Main.
And that's actually, right? That includes Hogan's Alley, which would be
Exactly. And then there's a section that's further west that is in part of lot 6C. So it's sort of a really rectangularly odd-shaped kind of piece there. Do you feel strongly about the retention of that city land in the public domain in both of those locations?
I think first and foremost, I think it would be most critical at the Hogan's Alley site, so the two on either side of Main. I think that would be a great opportunity to alleviate some of the pressures. I think with the hospital coming, we're going to see a lot of pressure on the existing affordable housing, not only in the downtown east side and Chinatown, but even in Strathcona as people start converting their basement suites into Airbnb or what have you. Because as we know, of course, St. Paul's, half the visiting population is from elsewhere in the province. So they need places to stay. We don't have hotels in that area. There's going to be a lot of pressure when the hospital comes in. So it would be a great opportunity to provide, affordable social housing for people who need it and are going to get displaced as we shift downtown eastward. And I think keeping a public land trust is the prudent thing to do. I'm really disturbed by the BC Housing Asset Transfer program that's going on now that's seeing us losing public housing assets. So I think this would be a great step in the right direction for a progressive council like ours.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Carr. Councillor Affleck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just add on to that. The section that you're talking about is an additional $100 million in the report. So the report talks about it sort of two phases. The first phase, $200 million. Second phase, $100 million in order to solve your. So I'm guessing that might be why we've kind of separated them out because of the costs.
Well, according to John Mackey, there's $100 million in profit in the black, as he reported in the Vancouver Sun.
If it's in black and white, I guess you have to believe it, as they say, right? But the challenge is when you're talking about the land trust and you're talking about land sales, and if, it's, where do you think the money would come from? The staff are saying there is some from CACs, but a lot of it might come from the sale of land.
Yeah.
How do you expect to pay for this?
Well, the idea behind a public land trust building social housing would be leasehold land. So it's a long-term investment. And no, it wouldn't immediately finance the project right here and now. That said, according to the same article from John in the Vancouver Sun.
A lot of airtime today, John Mackey.
Yeah, well, we all read Mackey. But I believe Brian had commented on the extent of the CACs that you extracted from the Oak Ridge project, which was to the tune of $150 million. So it doesn't seem inconceivable that you'll have the CACs to pay for a new road network.
Well, that wasn't cash, though. I mean, that was a mixture.
Well, I'm assuming that would be in-kind kind of stuff as well. That might include a road network or a park that the Creekside folk have been waiting for quite a while.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Fry. That's all well, I have one question for you. Thanks for your submission here today. I was just curious if the community had any further thought about Malkin versus National, which is one of the outstanding problems in the False Creek Flats thing. I know there's I visited Produce Row and the jobs there and the difficulties that attend to that. So has there been any discussion in the community about that?
Well, I mean, we've had some very preliminary presentations from staff. Of course, we're not traffic engineers. I know that the economics of doing National are significantly higher cost because the need to cross the tracks is quite a bit longer. So that's a factor. I know that apparently the Transportation Engineering Department and part of the False Creek Flats planning process, they have identified opportunities to utilize Malkin with minimal disruption to the produce terminals using their own forecourts for parking and with minimal disruption to the Cottonwood Gardens, which were, I think there was a great deal of consternation early in the game because the maps identified the original 12-lane right-of-way that was pretty much taking up all of Cottonwood Gardens. And since then, I believe the direction is not to, I think the 12-lane right-of-way is off the table as far as the kind of road that we want to build. So we are anticipating that, and we hope that it will be a great plan that works for the neighborhood and for Cottonwood and for the produce terminals. I think, once again, back to this original concern, we want to see it tied to this plan just so that we have a guarantee that it's going to happen and that it doesn't get shelved for a later date.
Okay, thanks for that suggestion. Okay, that's all the questions. Thanks for coming. Carol Lee has withdrawn. She was going to send a letter, so the council may have that. Alexander Rutherford is our next speaker. And here she comes. Afternoon. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Good afternoon, dear Mayor Robertson and City Councillors. I stand before you in support of City staff's recommendations outlined in the report of October 6, 2015, and I ask that you unequivocally approve the Northeast False Creek conceptual plan to guide the area planning without the viaducts for the remaining areas of the False Creek North official development plan and the 2 city blocks east of Quebec Street. I am the daughter and mentee of the late City Councillor and social activist Jim Green, and my husband, David Cookson, and I are also the community-minded and eco-friendly community residents of False Creek North. It is our view that many of the bold ideas put forth in the original Beasley, Hodson, Long, and Green plan via the Reconnect Ideas competition, which was back in fall of 2011, some ideas of which are incorporated into City staff's proposed reconnection of street networks in place of the viaducts, are integral actually to the optimizing this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So we at Jim Green Consulting see the removal of the viaducts as a giant step in the right direction towards, for starters, organically linking the communities of the downtown east side, Gastown, Chinatown, and Strathcona to False Creek. As well, it's an opportunity to revive the neighborhoods that formerly made up the city's economic cradle. We see this also as an opportunity to achieve our goal of becoming the greenest city in the world, a concept that was introduced originally in the 1970s by those who strongly stopped and opposed the construction of the freeway and championed Vancouver as a great place to live, work, and visit. Also, providing public space opportunities to create monuments in honor of those who struggled for social justice while making our city a better place. And finally, providing opportunities to restructure the city core to create great new spaces for cities and visitors alike. Very importantly, the removal of the viaducts will also enable the development of much needed welfare rate housing, seniors housing, affordable housing on previously undevelopable city lands. And furthermore, this unique city building opportunity will lead to a better public realm with accelerated delivery of Creekside Park extension, art installations, pedestrian as well as cyclist-oriented uses of Northeast False Creek. The redevelopment of the Northeast False Creek area with the removal of the viaducts is an opportunity to give False Creek a true heritage which has been lacking to date. And this must be realized by engaging with people in the area and by recognizing that the residents who, through their efforts, made Vancouver less car dependent and ultimately made our city the envy of the world. We commend City staff for the extensive work that went into producing this latest report and for recognizing the paramount importance of engaging stakeholders in a meaningful way. For it is our view that only with a firm commitment to community consultation will the necessary input and buy-in to the False Creek North Official Development Plan be secured. Convening one integrated process, which involves all affected stakeholders in designing the detailed scheme for the area with the viaducts fully removed, will go a long way to surfacing the issues and addressing the needs of all stakeholders, all the while refuting possible conceptions about entrenched agendas and ultimately crafting an optimal solution for the community at large. That said, there are a few remaining items which we feel are vital to the successful development in the area. We therefore invite you to consider ways to include in the next phase of work plans, for starters, the negotiation of a community benefits agreement that sees the deconstruction and subsequent build-out of the Northeast False Creek site, delivering direct benefits such as jobs, employment, training, and procurement to Vancouver's inner city residents and businesses. And secondly, the incorporation of infrastructure that both celebrates and promotes the Coast Salish people. For thousands of years, False Creek was occupied by the Squamish, the Musqueam, the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and this can therefore not be overlooked. That's all for me. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much, and you don't have any questions. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is John Murray, False Creek Residents Association.
Good afternoon, councillors and your worship and staff. My name is John Murray and I'm a director on the False Creek Residents Association. We have many concerns, but the concern I'm going to address today is the what appears to be a misconception of a bigger, better park. And so I'm looking at the Creekside Park extension and green spaces, and hence the green shirt, button, etc. So what I would like, I don't know how we can put this up, Laurie. So I'm looking at page 22, figure 10. First of all, the comparison of lands. No, not that one, the one with the two of them, please. Keep going. There should be one with the present Creekside Park and the proposed side by side. There was 3 of them.
Madam Clerk, it's the middle one, middle slide. Or next slide. That's it. We got it.
This is it here, okay. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, I want to kind of look at the size, and I'm trying to figure out how this is a bigger park here. First of all, okay, this is the original development plan here. This is the 9.06 acres of the Creekside Park extension from the 1990. So here we have the seawall and the riprap all along there. I'm wondering, is that included in the 9.06? Because over here, what you've done is it's all included along here. And I'm assuming this is what is referred to as the Creekside Promenade. If you take this area up here, which one, it's, I guess that's the Carroll Park, they call it, which is, I'm not sure if that's going to be hard space or if there's green space in there or not. And then if you take this space as well, which is the Dunsmuir connection, the figures of those are on the next chart, but for now, if you just eyeball them, I know this is an artist's rendition, but still, if you just eyeball those 2 spaces there, they would easily fit into here. So I'm concerned as to why this is not included, because the seawall is over here. It's not included as part of the green space there. So this is kind of a bit of a misrepresentation from my point of view here, as this makes the park look larger. As well, the Georgia Wharf, I don't see that as green space or as park space either, because, well, is the marina in Marina Quayside, is that a park, or False Creek Yacht Club? I don't really consider those park space as well too. So if you look at this area here, which is the chunk of, which is going to be removed from here, and if you look at the remaining portion here, I'm not sure there's that much of a difference between them. There's a little strip along here, which to me, that's underneath the SkyTrain, and as well, there is part of Quebec Street there, so I'm not sure that adds up to much. So if I could have the next slide, please, the one that shows the page 18, future park and open space. Oh, okay, sorry. Technology. We'll go back. Okay, sorry. How do I go back? Some of you know you might, yeah, okay. Okay, that's it, thanks. Okay, thank you. So here we've got some, oh boy, I can't read those. I hope you guys can. We've got here basically the Park and Plaza is stating that it's at 12.85 acres. And then we've got the Carroll Park at, well, I'm going to read my notes here. Carroll Park at 0.81 acres, and then the Dunsmuir connection at 0.47. And so as I just stated, I believe those two, their areas would easily fit into here as well. So we're looking at 1.2 acres roughly for there. I think we could easily take off close to an acre here. So if I do my math correctly, I come out to with around 12 acres. And when we look back at the, okay, here we go again, of this, 9.06 acres, even if the viaducts didn't come down, there's supposed to be about 2 to 3 acres beneath the viaducts, which are supposed to be hard surface recreational space either. So therefore, that comes out to around 12 acres, and this comes out to around 12 acres. Let's be conservative here. Let's say there is a difference of 1 acre between the two of them then. Still, with the proposed density increase here of over 2,500 units, if I do my math, we're actually short. And if we go with the 2.75 acres per 1,000 residents, we're still going to be short of about 20 acres to 25 acres of green space. And I see I've ran out of time.
Yeah, but you have a question from Councillor Carr.
Okay.
Great, thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks so much for coming, and I really appreciate that. And I will ask some questions of staff around the sort of detailing of the park size. And but I think your last comment is the one that interests me, which is it the position of the Falls Creek Residents Association that we as a city should be planning for a allocation of park space that matches what has been an objective of the park board at 2.75 acres per 1,000 residents.
Well, that would be nice in a perfect world, but we realize in this neck of the woods, there isn't really the space for it, so we would definitely like to see some CACs of some sort instead.
Mm-hmm.
So far, the only CACs we've really seen is that there might be a portion of the, if I'm correct, a proportion of the demolition covered by the interested party.
Okay. Do you have other individuals from the Falls Creek Residents Association that will be speaking on behalf of the Falls Creek Residents Association? There may be individuals, but I don't see anybody else indicated like that on our list.
Patsy McMillan is here, and she's number 27, I believe.
Okay, so she will be.
And there have been some letters written as well.
Good.
And then we've got 1,500 green lights still shining. People are tired of coming here. We've been doing this for over a decade, some of us.
Right. So my understanding from previous communications is that the delivery of the park and the timing of that delivery are of great concern. So in this report, the timeline appears to be stretching until after a number of things have been accomplished. And would you, and also there is a differentiation in one of the recommendations that says that once rezoning has happened, there will be an expedited delivery of all or part of the park. So if it's part of the park, is there, first of all, any amount that you're looking at or targeting as an association? Is there, is the 10-year timeline after all sorts of things have happened, is that too long? Is there are you seeking more precise timelines, shorter timelines, certain delivery of expedited park? I'm very interested in that.
For people who are aware of the history of all of this, the parameters keep changing, the goalposts keep moving with regards to this park. This park is not actually attached to the viaducts. It's from the original development plan in 1990 for when the developer reached a certain density, then the park was supposed to come in. Then it got changed. There was a whole and/or fiasco. And then there was the soils thrown in. And then there was the reconfigured park. And now it's the viaducts. We're afraid 10 years from now it's going to be something else. The density can change. There's still too many unknowns here for us to endorse this. Now, we would be in favor of a phasing in of the park, starting with perhaps a seawall, and maybe as a portion of whichever portion, maybe the portion to the east, as I discussed with another councillor earlier. So I realize it cannot, after all this and what still needs to be studied, and that it can't happen overnight, but it would be nice to see something happening before 2018, which they divided into phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3.
Right. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Councillor Affleck?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi. The very interesting information there. It was sort of along the lines I asked those questions yesterday to staff, but I'm wondering have you consulted that information to staff? Have you and staff already talked about the configuration of the parkland and the differences that you're seeing? Have you presented that to them already?
I think this has been pointed out in the past. Is that, I don't know, maybe this is what they call new math?
Were you part of the consultation process, though, as far as the latest phase?
Well, it depends what you mean by consultation.
Well,
several years ago, almost 10 years ago, there were several of us got together, 3 separate meetings, which were to plan the park. That was back like in 2005 or 2006, somewhere around there. We were consulted then, but pretty well everything since, as far as I would guess, things have been presented. Except for the odd questionnaire maybe that might be there at the presentation that you can fill in.
Okay, so you weren't put in the panel.
There has been as well, there have been members of our association representing on the joint working group, but that has been a big disappointment for not just our parties involved, but other parties that were involved with it. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
Thanks, Mr. Murray. That's all your questions.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jackie McMullen, General Manager, Times Square Suites Hotel.
Thank you for having me today. I'm Jackie McMullen, and I'd like to voice my opinion to keep the viaducts. I'm actually a resident of the West End, where I've been active in helping shape the West End plan for neighborhood character, housing, local business, heritage, and transportation and parking. I operate Times Square Suites Hotel in the West End, and I'm constantly reminded by our guests of how wonderful downtown Vancouver is due to the safety, access to quality dining and retail, and most importantly, the walkability and green space. We host many people from what I call car cultures, who drive to the hotel, park, and oddly enough, never use their vehicle during their stay. For many, this is a new experience, and for me, a proud moment. But we do have room for improvement. Our mantra at the hotel is live like a local for one night, 1 week, or a month, so 100% of our guests, when they check in, are introduced to the bike and walking paths in Vancouver, as we believe this mode is the best way to experience Vancouver like a local. I've had many questions and supportive comments from guests over the last few months about the green lights in False Creek. I've heard many comments about the desire to visit Chinatown and Gastown from the seawall, but they didn't due to the uninviting access under the viaducts. After spending much time in Crosstown area contemplating residence myself, and many years promoting tourism around Vancouver, I've had some comments and suggestions for consideration during this important time in finalizing this community plan in Vancouver's downtown. First and foremost, we need to attract and retain long-term residents to build a community. We need to preserve the existing infrastructure which is utilized and expand on the opportunities to make this area prosper for adults and children, both residents and visitors. And by visitors, this includes locals who also make it a destination. We need to make Crosstown, historic Chinatown, and the surrounding area accessible and attractive from the waterfront seawall. We need to encourage small business and the arts community to operate from this location between the water, the roads, and the green space. This will distract from it simply being a thoroughfare and entice people to make this a destination for visitors and neighbors. For example, Andy Livingston Park is populated every single day with soccer and baseball practices and games. With the increased interest in soccer from hosting FIFA, this park is a go-to destination to watch and learn the game for free or to join a league. The west side of Andy Livingston Park is enjoyed by families with the adjacent daycare facility and, from what I understand, potentially a school in the future. The 8-lane road proposal is a worry. The effects of removing the viaducts. The access from the seawall into historic Chinatown and Crosstown would require adults, children, elderly locals, and tourists to cross a massive traffic lanes. This is intimidating and precarious. The City of Vancouver plan to remove the viaduct shows the relocation of Pacific Boulevard to flow right past the soccer park and the daycare facility. This is not favorable for livability and safety. Anyone who lives in the existing buildings in Crosstown would lose a view corridor if towers were built to the east of the current Carroll path to the seawall. The benefits of keeping the viaducts. The area under the viaducts can be built out to include small businesses, local products and shops to accommodate residents, and a destination for tourists. Again, by tourists, I mean locals and foreigners. It's also protected from rain. This has been proven successful in other major cities, including our own, with an example of Granville Island, which is one of the top destinations in the city for locals and visitors. Art installations can be considered to add beautification, and others today have talked about music and cultural integration. Crosstown would become the real intersect between Gastown, False Creek, Chinatown, and the east side. Residents can build a safe and usable community. We can keep the view corridors from the seawall into historic Chinatown. We can preserve access for residents of Gastown, Chinatown, and Crosstown who will walk or cycle to the water. Our waterfront has been populating over the past couple of decades. This is our final opportunity to preserve the green space on the edge of the water and keep as much width along the water to facilitate festivals, activities, relaxation, and personal space for residents and visitors. In closing, my request is to keep the viaducts, preserve the green space east of Carroll Street Path and north to Andy Livingston Park, remove the vehicle traffic through Andy Livingston Park, create business and arts infrastructure under the viaducts, focus on safety and livability for this local community, allow the waterfront green space to be a welcoming access point into historic Chinatown, International Village, Crosstown, Gastown, the East End, and of course the Georgia Wharf can still exist with the viaducts intact. Let's make Site 9 Parkland, Site C North and South a thoughtful, attractive, and livable destination for residents and visitors. Let's upgrade the viaducts and build space for arts, retail, and linkage to green space. Maybe the viaducts shouldn't have been there in the first place, but they exist. They're part of our heritage. Let's make them purposeful and look to the future with a commitment to reuse and recycle and invent something amazing. Thank you.
Thanks very much. You don't have any questions, but thank you very much for coming. Our next speaker is Wade Compton.
Hello. In 2001, I published a book called Bluesprint, Black British Columbian Literature and Orature, which is an anthology of writing by African Canadians in British Columbia. And in it, I included some interviews with former residents of Hogan's Alley. That kicked off an interest in Hogan's Alley from some of my friends and some supporters of the Black community. And we organized a group called the Hogan's Alley Memorial Project. Since then, I've been working with it to raise awareness about Vancouver's Black community. Though they were built in 1972, the planning for the viaduct stretches back in one form or another to the 1930s. And the logic of the viaduct's creation was just another part of a massive 8-lane freeway that the City Council of the 1960s intended to build. This project would have cut East Vancouver, Strathcona, and Chinatown in half, all in one fell swoop. While many praised Vancouver's ability to thwart this project, which was done because of a movement that rose up to oppose it, such self-congratulation rings hollow for many Black Vancouverites. This is because the viaducts, the first phase of this larger bordered plan, were nevertheless completed right on top of the site of our city's one and only neighborhood with a significant and long-standing Black population. And this was no coincidence. Vancouver city planning during that era was exactly the same as it was in almost every other major North American city. That is, large development interests involving interurban freeways were planned to run through neighborhoods that they considered least likely to be able to oppose them politically. Invariably, that meant a Black neighborhood or a Chinatown, or in Vancouver both. And the massive citizen displacements were justified by wrapping these plans together with urban renewal schemes meant to push the residents out of their old neighborhoods and into towers. These latter became the infamous and deadly projects in many American cities, housing that was far worse in many ways than what they replaced. It's not so well understood, however, that Vancouver implemented the exact same institutionally racist plan, complete with its own project towers at McLean Park and Raycam. However, in the Vancouver Black community, they took this moment to integrate instead, and probably because these events happened 10 years later than in the US, and therefore after the civil rights movement had forced a change in attitudes about segregation. If the viaducts are brought down by the City Council, it opens up a great opportunity for the memorialization and representation of the Black community at that site, our only site that we can collectively claim, but that was taken away from us. Including us in the process of what is to come in that area is an opportunity to send the message to Vancouver's 20,000 plus citizens of African descent that their history in the city is remembered and valued and honored. A sacrifice was made for this mistake, and it was us. Urban planning then was more than a matter of traffic flow, and that is true today too. It's about who is included and who is left out. It is about history, and it's about what kind of city we want to be. And so I just want to echo mostly what Stephanie said so well, and say that there needs to be some kind of consultation with the Black community. And I want to ask if there is any planning included in this process to engage with the Black community and provide some kind of memorial.
Thanks. Mr. Cobb, you have a question from Councillor Ball.
Yes, thank you very much for coming in today. Much appreciated. We know that some of the most important cultural and artistic sort of beginnings in Vancouver originated in the area around Hogan's Alley and for many blocks surrounding it. Music, the music that was happening at the time and really was the basis for our musical talent today. When you spoke of a memorial, are you thinking of a cultural center, or what are you thinking would make the difference, and why is the removal of the viaducts necessary to make that possible?
I don't think it's necessary, but
Okay.
whether it's a memorial or in the form of a cultural center or whatever it is, some acknowledgement that this was an area that was significant to the Black community, and that's part of the history of it, is what I'm most concerned about. Whether or not the viaducts come down, that's what needs to be there. I mean, as it is right now, when Black folks come to the city of Vancouver and they ask, where's the Black community? You know, you can point to those viaducts and say, well, that's where it was, right? And that's what's there, in place of what was once there. It would be nice if there was something that was more positively interpretive of what happened, that you could direct them to and say, well, there's a place that you can discover what happened to the Black community.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I have a question from, oh, you're okay? I have one question, Mr. Compton. Do we know who Hogan was?
I think it relates back to a comic strip called Hogan's Alley that was written by Richard Outcault. It was making fun of a fictional Irish neighborhood in New York. And so it was a kind of synonym for ghetto, crazy neighborhood. It was a euphemism for the hood.
Do you know when the term came into general usage? Because it's an intriguing one.
In the 1890s. And there are other Hogan's Alleys, even another one in BC in Rossland. And so I think it was a way of saying the ghetto, essentially. And then I think it got forgotten, and so we called it Hogan's Alley.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt your literature's contributed to the remembrance, and hopefully there'll be more to be done as you propose. Now I see Councillor Carr has a question.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thank you, and thank you for a wonderful piece of work. I'm questioning your request that there be a clear consultation process. So you're looking for a consultation process, and I will ask staff about that. And what would be the aim of that process?
Just as Stephanie said, I think some kind of spatial response to what was lost, right? And I mean, I've heard lots of people say it could be something very creative. It can come in many different forms, right? So, but I think that what she said is really, really best, is that it's something that responds to what was lost. And what was lost was our presence, our visible presence in the city in a lot of ways. There was a recognizable place, a marker, a landing site, as she said, where people could go and find the Black community. So something that would work similarly. I mean, a cultural center would be the ideal, a place that had some sort of archive and that could tell the tale of that history would be ideal.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Compton. Michael Alexander is our next speaker.
Thank you, Councillor Meggs, and good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and councillors. I'm speaking today as the head of Reconnect Vancouver. Reconnect Vancouver is a new citizens association formed to support replacement of the viaducts with new at-grade roadways, pedestrian paths, and cycling routes that reconnect our city's downtown and diverse neighborhoods, a greatly expanded and promptly delivered Creekside Park extension, cultural, historic, arts, and sports facilities, and programming that welcomes all citizens, and a sustainable environmental landscape, including a new, more natural edge to the top of False Creek. Reconnect Vancouver supports the staff report and commends the staff for fine work. This city building moment started with another Reconnect project, the Reconnect Public Ideas Competition, which was won by the Beasley Green Dialogue PWL group, comprising some of our city's finest urban designers. It won the Visualizing the Viaducts Award and the People's Choice Award, although they ignored the competition's rule that the roads were not to be altered. Instead, they showed brilliantly that relocating Pacific Boulevard created a vastly better design. Everybody loved it. City planners took that design and listened to the public to identify its weaknesses. Prime example, Strathcona residents said that an extension of False Creek into their neighborhood would become another barrier, and instead wanted housing that fits with the community. In the staff report, they will get it. The winning design also aligned the new boulevard with Concord Pacific's towers. And by the way, the boulevard is 6 lanes, not as a number of people have tried to claim 8. The city recognized that Lining the boulevard with towers was replacing the viaducts barrier with a new barrier and has regrouped the towers at a modified Area 6C. That improves access to the park for the downtown east side, Chinatown, and Crosstown. It retains views of the North Shore Mountains and opens views of False Creek. The staff report demands the earliest possible delivery of the new park while wisely keeping the worst of the old contaminated soils in place. Now I'm going to speak for myself because these the comments I want to make go beyond Reconnect's mandate. The park should not be a giant expanse of expensively maintained lawn. Watch out for that tired great lawn idea. Yes, we will need open space for gatherings, but the keys to this park will be views of the magnificent setting and fabulous activation of the space. Urban sports can include the skate park, moved if needed, a bicycle skills course such as the one Seattle created under the I-5 freeway, and climbing walls on the pillars retained for Dunsmuir. Culture must attract all Vancouverites in all their diversity. I have heard requests from First Nations that a longhouse is needed in the city. What a great opportunity. We need to honor the history that was lost by the destruction of Vancouver's only Black community, Hogan's Alley. One opportunity as a memorial would be to name the Dunsmuir slope as Hogan's View. And we need art to fill and activate the space. Our city has a gem of an art society in the Vancouver Biennale, which brings public art and activities to public spaces. The Creekside Park should be a priority site for such a collaboration. I'm going to close again for Reconnect Vancouver. This is a city building moment for a city respected, envied, and copied worldwide for its ability to create great communities with livable, walkable, sustainable, joyous public spaces. This is a big multi-year project. Big projects don't always go according to plan, and sometimes they need tweaks. That encourages criticism. Remember the Olympic Village? It's empty. The city's on the hook for $1 billion. Now look at it. One of Vancouver's most successful, diverse communities. Reconnect Vancouver asks that you be unanimous in your support of the staff report, and in particular, place no caveats on recommendation A. It's decision time. We urge you to do it now, do it unanimously. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Ronzano. You have questions from Councillor Carr?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks so much for coming and for all your work in
Thank you, Ed.
in hosting city conversations. My question is around a statement that you made early on in your presentation where you said that one of the goals of Reconnect Vancouver is seeing the prompt delivery of Creekside Park. There are issues around that delivery and timeline and very much public interest in the prompt delivery. What do you think, given your background, is the most feasible prompt delivery date?
I think that's impossible to say unless you are both a staff person for the city and a representative of Concord Pacific, because there's got to be a negotiation there that's going to define a lot of this and establish the timeline. So I wouldn't want to try to predict that. All I can say is I will work diligently, our group will work diligently to push that as fast as possible. But we recognize it's a big project. Mm-hmm. It's complex. You don't want to leave something out that's really important in a rush to complete. One way that we might get the park going is in phases by treating different areas differently. Certainly the shoreline might well be a prime location because that's the most heavily used. I mean, the whole area is asphalt, right? And including the shoreline path, the seawall. that could well be a priority for reconstruction.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks very much, Mr. Alexander. I've got many questions, but I think you and I can catch up on them some other time. But maybe I'll ask you one because it's been raised earlier and you could maybe give your sense of it. So the park, as you know, is related to the contaminated soil issue. And you've followed these questions around, you've been involved in these kinds of projects in other cities, but from what you know about the contaminated soil and the park question, what's your assessment of how they fit together? Do you have enough information at this point?
Well, I do know that the layout of the park, I mean, the worst contamination, the best thing you can do about contamination is to leave it in place, cap it, and if you aren't going to extract it and take it really somewhere else, and that's pretty infeasible here, the best thing you can do is to leave it in place so you don't disturb it, cap it, and use that for facilities like parks where, you know, people aren't digging into it. The worst area is the area just that's part of the existing 6C, and it's right down to the water. It's where there was a coal gasification plant. That area, according to the maps in the staff report, becomes parkland. I think that if that's simply capped, that's a real opportunity to deliver at least a portion of the park earlier.
Right. Thanks very much. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Maybe if the folks leaving could just keep it down, please.
I'm sorry?
No, I'm talking to folks upstairs who are
Sorry. Thank
taking
you.
a while to head out. Thanks for your time today. Our next speaker is Brent Granby.
Mr. Chair, councillors, thanks for an opportunity to speak to this item. I'm speaking in support of the staff report today. I'm an artist. I live in the West End, but I rent space at 1000 Parker. And I come through this area probably 2 times a day now through a variety of ways. I ride, I walk, I take transit, or I drive a car. So I think removing the viaduct is really going to facilitate having better facilities for walking, riding, walking, and taking transit. When I looked at the staff report, I thought about the transit component, and I never even really noticed it, but there's no buses that even go down the viaduct. So I think it'll be a vast improvement in terms of our transit if the viaducts come down. But beyond all the great benefits of active transportation that bringing down the viaducts will bring, I think there's huge opportunities and huge benefits to the city in terms of creating more park space and city building. I think that's an exciting moment. And I think if you do decide to take down the viaducts, this will be, I think, an importance equal to not building a highway that Vancouver stopped doing, but had this little piece there. So I think this will be a huge moment for Vancouver. And I really hope you seize this opportunity and do it. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks for coming, Mr. Granby. You don't have any questions, but thanks very much for coming. Mr. Nathan Edelson. Don't have to explain the rules to you, Mr. Edelson. I think you've heard them before.
Thank you, Councillor Meigs. I'm here to speak in support of the council report, and really thank you for the report. I could understand almost all of it. It was well written. And recommending removal of the viaducts. This proposal will complete the work started by TEAM in the 1970s, and that project was not only to stop the freeway, this was the only portion that was built, but to create a world model of an inclusive mixed-income community in False Creek South, which we have a lot of work to do in renewing, and also Granville Island. Previous councils have updated that vision along the creek. Now it's time to complete the last pieces of the puzzle and create the housing, park space, and other amenities that best serve future residents and the many households and visitors who will enjoy this part of our highly livable downtown and its access to nature. We also have to be concerned about the impacts on the surrounding communities. The demolition of the viaducts creates the opportunities to provide amenities, economic energy, and other resources for these nearby communities. Some of these will come naturally with improved access to the waterfront, its many visitors, residents, and potential customers. But in the case of Chinatown and the downtown east side, special care needs to be taken to make sure these opportunities don't overwhelm potentially fragile communities. For Chinatown, efforts must be made to ensure there remains a critical mass of culturally distinct businesses and institutions that reflect the Chinese-Canadian culture. It's not just the look of the buildings, but the kinds of residents and the activities that are given priorities. As has been so well stated by the Black community, the viaducts were built on land expropriated from the Black community. It also had major impacts and expropriation on Chinatown. All levels of government have apologized for the ways in which the Chinese people were treated in the past. It's now time to ensure that some of the wealth created by taking down the viaducts is returned to its rightful communities of owners. And part of this can be done by helping to support the renovation of the historic Chinese Family Association buildings and to create a zoning that truly respects the area's historic cultures. In saying this, I don't think we can squeeze every ounce of value and provide both demolish the viaducts and provide what's needed on the site, as well as the surrounding communities just from the value of this project. I think we have to begin to think more broadly about other city investments, but also to celebrate that at least we have a realistic opportunity, and in part, I think thanks to the work of Councillor Louie and the Mayor, to really put forward a city's agenda with the federal government and hopefully with the province. As the community planner who helped initiate Vancouver's first downtown greenway along Carroll Street, I'm especially excited about closing its southern portion to traffic and expanding the area's park space. For many years, urban Aboriginal residents and First Nations have tried to secure a longhouse reflecting their cultures. What a better place than this along the greenway so it truly connects False Creek and ultimately to the Burrard Inlet and showcases the people's proud past as well as a wonderful future. The downtown east side will also become even more attractive to investment as a result of the community access. So many efforts have been made to ensure the area remains an important focus excuse me, for low-income residents that it should be recognized as a place where development can take place in the interests of local residents and not at their expense. As you know, this is a very difficult challenge. It requires a significant amount of housing in the reclaimed area to be built not just as affordable housing, but for low-income residents, and that some of the value associated with this project be transferred for housing in the downtown east side. Inner city residents also need jobs. More than 18% of Edgewater Casino staff are from the inner city. Many more will be hired during the construction and operation of the new 1 million square foot facility, which is an important part of the area's entertainment precinct. Demolition of the viaducts, construction of the new community, and operation of its facilities should meet the same or possibly higher standards for local jobs and procurement. And finally, this proposal offers a great deal of park space for the inner city. If this is to be a benefit for local residents, and I'm just finishing, the city's most important, most park-deficient area, it's important that the design and the programming be especially inclusive so that the low-income residents and people from many cultural backgrounds can share this incredible amenity. This requires considerable training of staff and residents in an ongoing process of building not just a recreation area, but a great community. And to repeat what Michael Alexander said, I think it's really important that the prices are going up, the opportunity is being lost, we're facing higher costs. It's time to make a decision and move ahead with this project as quickly as reasonable. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Edelson. You have a question from Councillor Carr.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Mr. Edelson, for coming to speak to us. I was caught by a statement that you made in the middle of your 5 minutes, and that was that this is an opportunity to advance the city's agenda for the area with the federal and the provincial governments. What did you mean by that?
But I think that over the last few years, and I think many of us have stopped thinking of the senior governments as helpful partners. And I think it's important that we test. There's been a change in government, a lot of promises made, and I think this is one example where it may be worth really looking at, can we go back to building great communities with all three levels of government, and hopefully leveraging some of the efforts that this city has already taken a lead with other municipalities in garnering the opportunity for additional resources, so that we think more holistically. We're so used to thinking of what can the city do with its development levies and CACs and a bit of capital money. And I think hopefully this can be a good testing ground for how can we, in addition to the rapid transit, how can we really work together.
I'm sorry, it was a little bit obtuse. Are you thinking of housing? Are you thinking transportation? I'm sorry, like were there some specifics?
I think it's the range of things. We have, housing is a very central one, certainly to people in the inner city. It's the central issue. We need low-income housing on this site. We need it in the downtown east side. It's a disgrace that as a country, that we have so many people suffering and homeless, and we shouldn't take any action that by accident makes conditions worse. So I think that the three levels of governments have a real role in that part of the activity, and we just have to learn how to ask and work creatively with a government that may be more open to listening to us, at least for a while.
Great, that's clear. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Carr, and Ms. Earlson. That's all your questions. Thank you. Doris Chow is our next speaker.
Hi, I have a USB. Someone said that I could show a photo. Little help? Oh, okay. Ah. Thank you. I think I need to put this lower. There we go. I may be a little younger, but I'm still technically challenged. Okay. Hello, Mayor and Council. I come to you today to ask of three requests in this project. One, I want to ask that Council not approve removing the viaducts until comprehensive analysis is completed demonstrating that the rerouting of traffic off Pryor and Venables to Malkin Avenue will not impact businesses on Produce Row, or at least allow the Falls Creek Flats planning to catch up first. And I want to thank Councillor Meigs in recognizing and mentioning the Produce Row and the potential impact on Malkin Avenue and the businesses there. And I do want to recognize that there is a need to downgrade Pryor. That I have no objections to that. However, this idea of minimal disruption, I think, is false. This picture was taken during the summer. I go down to Produce Row on a weekly basis to pick up food for Downtown Eastside Kitchens, and this is the common view on the street. This is Malkin Avenue, and it is not. It does not have the capacity to even deal with the trucks that are going to Produce Row on a daily basis. So to reroute traffic onto Malkin is, I think, an issue. On top of that, there is also all these businesses on Produce Row support the small businesses across Vancouver, and the impact onto the Malkin Avenue Produce Row businesses could potentially impact the businesses, the smaller businesses across the city, including the groceries in Little India, Chinatown, on Victoria Drive, you name it. And I see them on a weekly basis, all those business owners. Second, I ask that Council seek a more detailed analysis of the associated costs and benefits to removing the viaducts. In the presentation to Council yesterday, staff claimed that the preliminary analysis shows a total of $300 million in public benefits in the form of affordable housing, daycares, etc. However, I feel that this number is rather optimistic based on a best case scenario of maximizing development cost levies and community amenity contributions, and which are based on several major assumptions. I urge Council to consider the following. In terms of DCLs, according to the 2014 Annual Report of Development Cost Levies presented to Council on June 10, 2015, in 2014, $57.5 million was collected from all DCL districts. In 2013, citywide DCLs totaled $57.6 million, and the year before that, in 2012, it was $78.8 million, the highest in the past 22 years since 1993. The benefits analysis includes all of the Viaducts project area to qualify for DCLs. As the staff report indicates on page 36, only a portion of the Viaducts project area is within the citywide DCL district, the section between Quebec and Gore Streets, and urges council to consider incorporating Northeast Falls Creek into the citywide DCL district. But this has not been confirmed yet, and the potential implications or barriers to extending the DCL district to include the whole project area have not been presented. Further, on page 1 of the 2014 Annual Report of Community Amenity Contributions and Density Bonusing, a mouthful, also presented to Council on June 10, 2015, states, in the 2014 approvals of additional density will secure public benefits valued at approximately $234 million. Approximately 2/3 of these public benefits, 157 million, were attributed to the approval of one major project rezoning at Oak Ridge Center. And further, on page 2, it states, approximately 80% of public benefit value was offered as in-kind contributions, meaning that they will be provided on site when the new developments are constructed. The remainder of the allocated funds were offered as cash in lieu contributions. Even if we assume the same level of DCLs as last year and the same CACs as the major project rezoning at Oak Ridge Center, it would only total $214.5 million. And the estimated capital cost to remove the viaducts is $180 to $200 million. Lastly, I urge Council to seize the opportunity to create a living legacy for the communities that fought the freeway from ripping through Strathcona, Chinatown, downtown Eastside neighborhood, and the erasure of Hogan's Alley as well. I think there's an opportunity for city to do something really great. And I'm totally over
A
time.
question from Councillor Affleck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, thanks for coming. Very helpful, very interesting, very along the lines of what I've been doing in my math as well. So I guess, I mean, and I appreciate that. And I guess from the point of view of the Produce Way, obviously you showed a picture of the chaos. And once they, I guess the question is, once they leave that area to deliver their goods around the city, how, with the removal of the viaducts, how are those guys down there, how are they feeling about that, if you have that relation?
I don't know, and I think that that's where there should be more meaningful consultation with Produce Row. I know that I've tried to kind of push some of the Falls Creek Flats planning documents onto them, but they're kind of just like, I don't know what this means. So I think there needs to be more meaningful engagement with them to figure out where do their trucks go and will this impact them.
Because right now, can you describe, in that picture you sort of show the chaos, describe how they get out and how they say deliver to, say, the downtown core right now. If you're leaving there with your produce and you're going to, I don't know, Safeway on Davie Street, I mean, how would they get there?
I actually don't know.
Okay.
But the traffic that would be rerouted onto Malkin would certainly congest the trucks coming in and out regardless of which direction they're going.
So the viaducts are fairly helpful right now, but there could be a solution, but you'd like to know that first.
Just that the rerouting away from prior to take into consideration the traffic that is on Malkin currently.
Right.
That if you're talking about respecting the Strathcona and Cottonwood Gardens and Produce Row, that street just can't get any wider, and it's already over capacity.
And national, how does that fit into the picture?
I don't know. I don't know any stakeholders on national, so I think that would be a staff thing.
Yeah.
Consultation.
Oh, appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. I wonder, Mr. Howe, if you wouldn't mind forwarding that information that you presented to Mayor and Council. I'd really appreciate having, I caught some of the statistics, but maybe not all of them. And then I'll have an ability to ask staff about that information. So especially the DCLs and the CACs and how they arrived at their figure versus what you've projected as a baseline. And in terms of Malkin and the Produce Row, I've been down there too, and I've been stuck as trucks back up and take their time to get into their the storage facilities, warehouse facilities. So My understanding is, and I'll ask again staff this, my understanding is that we will not know an answer to that till the Falls Creek Flats plan is done. That's where the decision is going to be made around where the alternate route is going to be off prior. My understanding is there will be a wider route. It will accommodate, or I will establish whether or not the aim is to fully accommodate the producers who are there right now or not. I think that's your question, right?
Yeah, just that it not impact the businesses there. There is a real strong link not only to small businesses, but also that is the infrastructure that has been in place due to history of the Chinese, Canadians, and in food growing and food distribution. And I think that's a legacy that needs to be protected and maintained. And it's also our food system. So, so that's of real concern.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Ball?
Yes, thank you. If we could possibly have a copy of your entire presentation, if you could get that into us. Thank you for being so lively and also so informative. Thank you.
Thank you. There's so many documents, I just couldn't stop reading.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions too before you go, Ms. Chow. So the crux of your, I mean, you started, I think, with the picture, which indicates that in your mind at least, and I don't disagree with you, it's an unacceptable situation today.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something the city should look to, whether or not the viaducts are replaced.
I think there's a real opportunity with the viaducts being removed, as in my last request of creating a living legacy for all the communities, surrounding communities. But I do think that it needs to proceed with extreme caution because of the cost-benefit analysis and because of this, like, I rarely ever hear of it being rerouted to national. It's constantly Malkin. And that poses a concern. And a lot of these businesses on Produce Row also provide food donations to a lot of neighboring downtown Eastside organizations, and they often waive delivery fees for small orders because of its proximity. So to lose, it's a real asset not only in terms of our food system, but in terms of our downtown Eastside neighborhood being able to actually survive in a way. Yeah.
Well, I share your concern, but when I moved to Strathcona in 1983, Malkin was presented as the solution then, and many years have passed without action. I think that your point is well taken, that the planning process on those on Produce Row is really critical, but in my submission it's been critical for a long time and needs to be resolved one way or the other.
Absolutely.
Yep. Thanks for coming down today.
Thank you.
Our next speaker knows a lot about Strathcona, Lana Zisplatt. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ilana Zisplatt. I'm the chair of the Strathcona Residents Association. And with me here today, I have three of my neighbors who live on Prior Street, Katerina Crema, Caius, and CL English. And two of them would like to say a few brief words to you today.
Hi. My name is Katerina Crema. I'm 11 years old. My family has lived on Prior Street for 86 years. The viaducts have made my street into a noisy, scary, and dangerous place to live. I see car crashes all the time and don't feel safe even walking on the sidewalk there. If you decide to take the viaduct down, I want you to promise me that you will also take away the dangerous traffic from Prior Street. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Caius English, and I'm 11 years old. The viaduct has made my street into an unsafe place to live. I don't feel safe for me or my family to walk along Prior Street. I hear car crashes all the time. My auntie was hit by a car on Prior Street, and it makes me scared this could happen to me. I have a brother, a little sister, and a grandma, and I worry all the time when we have to walk out our front door. If you decide to take the viaduct down, I want you to please take away the dangerous traffic from Prior Street so me and my family can feel safe. Thank you.
Very much.
There we go. Thanks, Jerry. The viaducts represent the only section to be built of a late 1960s freeway scheme that proposed to obliterate much of Strathcona, Chinatown, Gastown, and turn Vancouver into a typical highway-focused North American city. I think we're all thankful that that freeway proposal was stopped by strong community opposition, and that as a result, unlike other cities we know nearby, Vancouver has a vibrant, livable downtown and pedestrian access to the waterfront. This story is especially relevant to the Strathcona Residents Association because it was our predecessors, SPOTA, who formed in 1968 to oppose this atrocious freeway scheme, along with destructive urban renewal plans that would destroy our historic neighborhood. We, the SRA, are direct descendants of the Strathcona Property Owners and Tenants Association, and I'd like to think that we inherited their spirit of courage to stand up for our community and planning that focuses on human beings. Like SPOTA, we have the capacity, energy to get big numbers of residents on the streets, on petitions, and in the media. The Viaducts brought to Strathcona what that god-awful freeway scheme would have brought to downtown Vancouver: large and dangerous volumes of constant traffic, noise, pollution, chronic sickness, and accidents in a residential area. They created a street that people avoid, a local park that for safety reasons our children are not allowed to use. It's only right then that the Viaducts removal plan you're voting on today will directly involve the remediation of this 40 years of damage caused to Strathcona by the Viaducts, returning Prior Street to a safe and livable residential street and safe access to our local park. It took us close to 3 years to work with the engineering department to get on board with the notion of a new arterial to replace Prior. And although an alternate route to Prior is clearly suggested in the recommendation H in this report, it's not written as part of the Viaducts removal plan, nor is it worded as a municipal commitment. We cannot get excited about the notion of removing the Viaducts while there remains a chance that Prior Street will continue hosting the Viaducts' terrible legacy of a freeway through a residential neighborhood for an unknown amount of time. Perhaps it'll be another 40 years. We'd like to see this council take on the commitment and responsibility to make this right by incorporating the downgrading of Prior Street into the Viaducts removal plan, and not leave it to, let's see what'll happen in the flats, or we want it to happen, but we can't guarantee the timing, or an alternate road is a good idea, but it isn't our financial or political responsibility. That's how the report reads to me. The engineering department has left themselves a very convenient loophole on page 31 of this report in the executive summary, blatantly stating, after all the work that we've done together, that there's nothing inherent in the engineering design or operation of Prior Street that would be considered a safety concern or that requires immediate rectification. We've asked that this statement be removed, otherwise it makes it impossible for us to support this report. We have the energy, enthusiasm, expertise, and passion to help shape our city. It's unfortunate that all the volunteer time and energy has to be spent on just getting heard. We've made progress, but this isn't good enough. I think it is publicly and formally clear now that Prior Street is not safe today and is not an option as an arterial for Vancouver's future. I'd like to see this council direct staff to make a firm, immediate commitment to incorporating that into the Viaducts removal plan. And I think that Pete Fry's suggestion before of simply amending recommendation I and J, now that I've looked at the report, to include recommendations B to H all the way through, could be a simple and technical solution for this issue, but it would also be a gesture showing that you're willing to walk the talk, and that you're motivated and available to carry out what is currently now just a suggestion in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carr has some questions for you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming. Thank you, all of you, for coming and for speaking. Your words are very powerful. My question has to do with the timing. And I mean, you've raised the points. And if there was, so you're not satisfied that there is an actual commitment to downgrade Prior to a residential street?
I understand from the report that city staff thinks it's a good idea. But when we met with them in the summer and have been speaking to them about how that would actually happen, it's not city money, it's not on the city timeline, it's not in any budget. It's not clear if it's even going to happen because it's part of the planning for the flats, which has just started. So we all think it's a good idea. This is great progress that the engineering department is formally saying this, because until July, Prior was just fine as it was, and they were going to leave it alone. So I'm thrilled and thankful that we're all on the same page, but this report does not commit to downgrading Prior. It's suggesting that it's a good idea, but it's very vague about when that's going to happen, and we can't support this report unless we have that in writing. And we've been told many times before, we'll take care of you, don't worry. You've come on the street, you've told us that Prior is unacceptable and really difficult. We'll take care of you, just leave it with us.
Okay.
We want the time in writing.
I did ask staff questions about this, and they did confirm for me that it will happen, and that will include traffic calming measures as well. So if somehow I can work around the wording of that to make it clear that it will happen. And then the second point is, differentiated, a second point is the timing of it, which is upon the completion of the Falls Creek plan, because that's where the alternate route, Malkin, let's say, is going to be considered. Are you okay with the fact, if those statements are separated, there is a clear commitment to downgrade Prior, and then a statement that the timing of it will come at the end of the Falls Creek Flats plan? Is that okay?
I think so. I think so, because there's, I mean, obviously in the report, there's also part of recommendation H is that we will be continuously working on immediate safety measures for Prior Street, which we are working together with the engineering department. We're making constant steps to identify and deal with safety issues on Prior, but that recommendation H is outside of the
rest
first recommendations, which are, these guys are a go, we are committed to, council is going to be responsible for taking these steps, but then H is all of a sudden outside of it. So if there really is the motivation, I think if I'm reading the document properly, there's an easy technical way to say, yes, that is important to us. We're sticking it in with the top.
I think that your suggestion, I'll pose those suggestions to staff to include H in I and J, and also to see if the wording can just be firmed up a little more in H so that it's very clear that this will happen.
We are very happy to work on the wording of H. We're happy to work with the engineering department. We actually have a close working relationship with them, and we'd love to be productive, not to be opposing and to be on the street. We'd love to help with this. We have ideas and we're here, and we're thrilled that our voice has been heard in this report. Is just not secure enough. So that's what we're asking.
Good, that's fantastic. And just to confirm as well, there is a statement in here that says that work is ongoing and will continue to be ongoing to mitigate the traffic issues on Prior, and that I'm assuming.
There's also a statement on page 31 that says that Prior Street is not unsafe and there's nothing wrong with it. And I have a very serious problem with that, and with the report that made that declaration.
Urban Systems Prior.
We worked for hours with Urban Systems. We did the walkthrough. We tried to help, but the fact is that people avoid using Prior Street. And so you're not going to find a lot of accidents on that road. It's only the people who have to take the bus and wait at the bus station that are putting their life at risk every day. So to say that Prior Street is not safe and there's nothing wrong with the design of it is, I can't be on board with this report unless that's removed, and we've asked Jerry to remove it.
Yeah,
so
I've made a note of that too. Thank you. Thanks so much for coming.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Affleck. Oh, I'm sorry. Try again. Right here. There you go.
Right.
Should be good now.
Hi, thanks for coming. Thanks for your input, all of you. You know, Councillor Carr will ask that question and likely try to make some attempt, it sounds like, to revise the recommendations. But at the end of the day, what we know from the report is the first phase is $200 million. The second phase is $100 million. Staff are saying we can't do phase 2 without doing phase 1, the $200 million phase. So would you, if you had a choice of not taking down the viaducts and coming up with a solution for Prior in your neighborhood, would that be your preference?
We have a lot of ideas about how to improve Prior Street as is, and I think that we should look into those together, because even if the viaducts do come down, it's not going to be tomorrow. So there are immediate measures that can be taken. We see amazing opportunities to rethink those lands. Having a concrete sort of jungle under the viaducts is not the best that we can do. The viaducts, I believe, were a bad idea to start with. I think they're a sore thumb for Strathcona. They brought 40 years of a really difficult situation. And so we'd like to see some forward-thinking, inspiring planning going on there. I understand that it's costs money to make those changes. And what we're looking for is a commitment to saying the viaducts caused this traffic, the viaducts are coming down, we're going to take away this traffic, and we're going to find better, forward-thinking, responsible ways to move vehicles and trucks through Vancouver that's not on a 125-year-old street.
That last comment is strange to me because there's still going to be traffic. It's just
Yeah.
going to be coming from a different street. Instead of coming off the viaducts, it'll be coming off Pacific,
Right.
and then, so you're not going to, I mean, obviously traffic flow in the city is decreasing over time, but
Yeah.
You will have the same volume, roughly, no matter what we do, into that side of town. And
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
not going to change
People are
that.
going to drive, and that's great, but if there's an arterial that's designed to move trucks and commuters in and out of Vancouver, it should not be on a residential street.
But that's what we're doing. We're turning this into Pacific Avenue. Avenue becomes a residential street plus the route east from downtown. That becomes.
But
what
I
is-
think that the engineers are designing something that's meant to work together, whereas prior pre-existed and the traffic was just thrown onto it. And so there's the context there of the houses being 2 feet away from speeding traffic, not enough safety on sidewalks. There's issues there and pollution. I think that if we're designing a new Pacific Boulevard, a lot of those issues can be dealt with on a design level. The problem on Prior is that it was there before the traffic came, and it's been forced to accommodate a use that doesn't work. And yes, there's going to be need to adapt and compromise no matter what we do, because we're not working with a clean slate. But I think that we can do much, much, much better than a 30-second highway experience with these old viaducts from the 1970s and an arterial on a residential through a historic neighborhood.
Right, and it's sort of interesting though, because underneath the viaducts, if they were to stay, if we decide to tear down the viaducts, we will be putting a lot of traffic down on the ground into a neighborhood and beside a park. The same number of cars that are driving. So therefore, and I live in Yaletown, on the other side of Yaletown, with kids who go to Elsie Roy. You know, they walk across Pacific. It's an interesting experience as a parent. So it's not an enjoyable walk across the street with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the experience if we decide to take these viaducts down that we're creating in that neighborhood in the future. It seems to me, and yet still not solving your problem. From what I can tell from this report yet. I mean, we've got a 10-year, potentially you'll see this based on the timeline in this plan. So I guess back to my question, which first? I mean, would you want us to fix your streets first and then go back and look at the viaducts, or get the viaducts done and then come back to you? If we can't do both.
We saw the removal of the viaducts as an opportunity to solve our problem, but maybe what we've done is raised awareness to our problem, and there's cheaper, more creative ways to solve it. Prior Street is unacceptable, and it's a liability waiting to happen. It's a lot more dangerous than crossing Pacific. I mean, Pacific is a newer street, and the crossing times are different, and the setbacks are different. So if we can find good ways where the community is involved to downgrade Prior, and we've been talking about this since 2009. We have a project that we've worked on together with Grandview Woodlands to calm Prior. We're really happy to work on it. We're really happy to help plan the viaducts lands. I don't want to say that one is more important or more urgent, but Prior Street is unsafe, and I'm glad that everybody now sees it. That was our goal, and that something has to be done about it urgently.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Affleck. Mrs. Blatt, I just have one follow-up question. You may have been here to hear Ms. Chow talk about Produce Row. And certainly when I lived in Strathcona, Malkin was supposed to be the solution, and that was 1983. And then there's the Cottonwood issue, which we're going to hear from too. Has your association had a chance to think about the issues that are raised by diverting traffic over to Malkin and the conflict that could arise with the Produce Row or with Cottonwood? And do you have any advice for council on that?
As Pete said, we don't take on the responsibility to design roads. We don't, haven't looked yet into the difference between Mulliken and National and William and all the options on the plate. I think there's going to be some adaptation that's going to happen in any case, but I think that removing an arterial from a residential street and putting it into industrial lands is a better idea, especially when these industrial lands are being rethought at the moment. It sounds to me like there are a few ideas of how to work with Produce Row using different parking solutions. There's ways of keeping and saving the gardens as well. Maybe when we're planning for the future, roads don't have to be as wide and as fast, so that there's a way to incorporate the gardens. We don't want anyone to feel removed or replaced, or for any businesses to suffer. It's very important that goods be moved in and out. And I think that we've coexisted with Produce Row all these decades. We all drive through the flats. We all drive on bike routes. There's ways for people to get along together. I think it's the notion that you have a highway and that you never have to stop and that you're allowed to go your whatever speed you want through a city is a wrong notion. That's 1950s thinking. We should be coexisting with many different concerns, and I think that we should educate towards that with this new forward-thinking plan.
Thanks very much. That's all for today. We don't have any further questions, but thank you for coming, and thanks to you folks from Prior Street for your submissions. Our next speaker is Randy Clark, elder from Hogan's Alley and United Black. Is Mr. Randy Clark here? Seeing anybody rush to the, or Yasin Kiraga? Is Yasin here? Looks like he's coming from the back now. Yasin Kiraga? Yeah, here we go. Thanks, Mr. Kiraga. It's you're up.
Councillors, Mayor Robertson Gurugwa, the magnificent and the leader of the House, the chair of this meeting, the councillors, and the planners who have done such historical, remarkable work just to plan for the future, to make Vancouver the best city we want to see on the international level. My name is Yasin Chirage-Misag, and I'm the Executive Director for United Black Canadian Community Association. My office is at Hogan's Alley, upstairs between Union and Goa, 739, room 22. I use that office with the other 10 African organizations who realized that that is the home of the black people. And the organization right now, it has members about 100. It also owned the church. We restored the church. As you know, there was African Fountain Chapel, which was destroyed partly as a result of the urban renewal 50 years ago. And the church right now has about 70 people. We always attended the church services and other cultural services at the Strathcona Community Center. So I will start with a statement from that I will draw from Universal Declaration for Human Rights, which the second act, which is known as Universal Political and Civil and Economic Social Rights. The document was done by Eleanor Roosevelt 1947, in which all countries, including Canada, agreed to promote human rights. But that act I've read, it states that all citizens have the rights to self-determination, to practice their culture, heritage, without fear, under the protection of the state. 60 years ago, that act was violated by the planners of that time. I've been working on urban renewal, the Viaduct itself project for about 3 years when I was still at the University of British Columbia. The professor introduced a course about Nelson Mandela and the founders of ANC. It was showing about the globalization movement of ideas from the Western nations to other countries. And this is when a student mentioned to me that there was a black community in Vancouver, and it was the media, ABSA UBC Media Group, already written several articles fighting against the urban renewal and proposing to raise down the viaduct, to remove it, to create affordable housing, opportunities for businesses, and to repay back the communities which lost, including the black community. Why is it? Yes. So, Hoganizale, I'm standing here to talk about Hoganizale and its relationship to the viaduct. Those who were there at that time, we have been with the two mayors. Mayor Taylor, who was the city, ran the city multiple times independent. He fought for the desecration of the black community at Hoganizale. And the second mayor, I think, the mayor we have today, he came up with the idea of recognizing and honoring the black community which was there. But the most important thing that I would love to say is that the viaduct came as a result of National Housing Act 1936, which was aimed to create, to rebuild blighted communities, renovate them, creating affordable housing and opportunities to fight for poverty and slums in Vancouver. It promoted the project through what we call Central Mortgage and Housing Corporation. And it was given the grant to run that project. 1958, Leonard Marsh, a professor at the University of British Columbia and the Vancouver Housing Association, proposed a project to carry survey in Strathcona. And in that project, Leonard Marsh commented that there is a need to recognize and honor the black community. So finally, the viaduct, it was a complete failed plan, which was rejected by the federal government, and Paul Heller, who is alive still today, he recommended that the only solution was to resign for him.
You have a question from Councillor Ball, but you have to, you're over time by a minute now.
Thank you so much.
We have a question from Councillor Ball.
Before Councillor Ball's question, I'd love to show you that at the time of urban renewal and the construction of the viaduct, it wasn't among the proposed policies to be funded.
Would you like to circulate this to council?
Yes, people who used the church, Strathcona Church, African Church, were 2,500, and none of them is available. And there's all this information included into this report. It was called the Black Strathcona Community Roster.
All right, thank you. Now,
thank you so much.
Councillor Ball, you have a question.
Yes, thank you. And I'm sorry we're all limited to 5 minutes today. So my question for you is just to make it really clear, what's the most important thing that you're asking council for today? Is there an action? Is it the community center or a cultural center around in the area? I would like council to be able to know what your most important thing moving forward is. I think most of us respect and are aware of the history and and certainly the tragedy for the loss of many of the musicians' homes and the cultural history that we have. But if you could just let council know what your most important ask today is.
Dear the councillors and the mayor, thank you so much, Councillor Elizabeth, and thanks for your support all along the way. This is the plan that we have already. And when you look at this plan, it was designed by a community member from United States, from Africa, who already knew what was happening in Vancouver, and he designed this. We asked him that would love to see that there is restorative justice. There should be recognition beyond the plaques, because there are thousands of different businesses, Playa Restaurants, Vice Chicken, New Orleans Club, country clubs, promotion companies, and the institution of the church within it that demonstrates a community in political science. And this would love to see that something like this, it happens. This is the front view of this, and I'm going to leave one copy of this plan, which is not complete down there. You will see what we need. We need a culture center, which actually, with the down floor, at least with the business as they used it to be, African businesses, restaurants, barber shops, clubs down, and then the second floor we need to see there is a theater company, conference room, Afrocentric, people where they could come and learn about the history and the heritage of the people of African descent since 1858. And then they would love to see that there is a daycare home, because lots of African kids, immigrants, those of the people of African descent, they are just loitering around in the city. Would love to see upstairs there is housing, for affordable housing, and this will bring opportunities to those who already been discredited out of the community. Our elders like Thelma Gibson, Sylvester Gibson, we have Elena Collins, we have Robert Crumps and others. These elders, all of them are still around here, but every time I go to visit them, they are in care centers. No, life changed. Life is no longer they used to be.
You just pass
This
that to
plan,
the
it will be a great remarkable assistance.
Just
So far right now we have, yeah.
So you have to.
And this copy includes all the names of people who used to live in Strathcona, but specifically this is a community roster for the member of the church who are active member of that church. I also have documents here which shows that the city of Vancouver, 1976, authorized some of unknown people within the city to sign up to sell the African church. And it will be that the city either buy back or do something about to restore that church. One advice that I can leave to the city of Vancouver is one. Idi Amin, all of us we know that was a terrible leader. He destroyed the properties of the Indians, and most of them came here. ISS was created by Prime Minister Stephen Trudeau as a sanctuary place for the people of African descent. And we know Fire Hall Theatre was just slightly going to be given a community center for the black community. Maybe we are not too far.
You've run out of time on the
Thank you so much. Thanks for recognizing and honoring our community, and would love to see that the viaduct should be set down and restorative justice should be proceeded till to the logical conclusion.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor.
Randy Clark is not here today, right?
Randy Clark was unable to attend because he thought that we're going to have a meeting at 6.
Okay.
And then we thought that Mrs. Kombi, who is the COP member and a member of our organization, should represent him here. And Kombi is behind here with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, our next speaker is Chris Coleman. Welcome, Mr. Coleman.
Good afternoon, councillors, Mr. Mayor. My name is Chris Coleman. I'm a very happy, very proud Strathcona resident, and I'm convinced after many years of meetings and reports and protests and petitions and more meetings and more reports, I'm convinced that the replacement of the viaducts is a good idea, progressive even. I'm also convinced that the viaducts of 1971 has a direct relationship with Prior Street as it exists today. Okay, and that's Prior Street. Some people who don't live there call it a main event. The people who live around it and raise their family around it and just want to keep safe as they walk down the street call it a highway that runs through their neighborhood. I'd like to read you a couple lines from a city webpage, the city's Viaduct webpage. I'm sure you're familiar with it, but if you bear with me for a second, it's under the title, Why Remove the Viaducts? And it reads, the viaducts are remnants of a 1960 freeway plan that was never fully completed. Originally designed to connect downtown Vancouver, the viaducts now act as a barrier, cutting off surrounding neighborhoods from Falls Creek waterfront, the downtown, and each other, and offer poor connectivity to the surrounding area. Now, if you add any concern for public safety to this, and the fact that it's dangerous as hell right now before any changes, no one could argue that this describes Prior Street. Nobody in my neighborhood could have wrote this any better than the city did themselves. So I'm here today to ask for a definitive commitment to downgrade Prior Street. And to not include this in the viaduct plan, I think is a contradiction to the exact reason you're taking them down in the first place. I'd say over the years I've had conversations with all the councillors, not necessarily on this issue, but I get the impression, if not for being a city councillor, and if you lived in my neighborhood, I think there's a great chance you'd be lined up right behind me, most of you would be lined up right behind me, to have the same conversation with the people who are making the decisions. So I realize you have competing, demands, and at risk of oversimplifying, I'm going to suggest it's either the right thing to do or it's the wrong thing to do, and ask you to make a definitive commitment to downgrade Prior Street. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Coleman. I have a question from Councillor Carr.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Mr. Coleman, for coming. I know you're very active in your community and with the Strathcona Residents Association. I've asked this of our previous speaker, but I just want to be clear if this meets your desire for definitive commitment. That if the wording that's in our recommendations were to make it very clear and separate from anything to do with timing, but that there is a commitment to, it does say it, but it's kind of, anyway, but to make it even more clear that the commitment is to downgrade Prior to a residential street, period.
My message is to make a definitive commitment to downgrade Prior Street.
Yes.
And if you think that's the best way to go about it, and that'll make it happen, I trust, Councillor Carr.
Okay. So the timing of it, as stated in this report, would be on the completion of an alternative route. So there is in the report, and I'll work with staff to make sure the wording is absolutely crystal clear, but it is that there is a commitment in another planning process, the Falls Creek Flats planning process, to come up with the alternative route. And that if that is clear as a commitment, that there will be an alternative route.
I feel we're so close.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got the report right here. And as I said, in my opinion, in the way I see it, Prior Street is the viaducts. They're one and the same. You're not taking down half a viaduct. You're removing the old system.
Right.
And, talk is cheap, they say. Anything can happen with the Flats plan.
Great.
But I appreciate the way you're going, and I take you serious, and I certainly take you at your word.
Okay. And is there any advice that you can give us or our staff around, in the interim, while the process is going on, if the decision comes to remove the viaducts, any advice in terms of what might mitigate some of the traffic issues and the dangerous situations that you've described in the short term?
In the short term?
Yes.
A slower street, mandatory slower street, speed bumps, enforcement, more residential parking.
Okay.
It'll all be, all of that will, even you call that short-term solution, nobody's trick-or-treating next week on Prior Street.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't know if we can do it that short term. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor.
Thanks very much, Mr. Coleman, that's all your questions?
Thank you.
Vince Foderer, please. Vince Foderer here. Council, I'm just looking down the list, and we have about an hour to go, and I personally am hoping we can get to Jill Weiss, number 34, who has to make complicated travel arrangements. So if we can try to do that, that would be great. You may have your questions for other people in between, but looks doable to me, maybe not. Anyway, Mr. Froder, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Council. Sorry, my English is so bad. Thank you, Mayor and Council. And I also want to thank you, the Coast Salish Nation, that we are in Indian territory before everybody else that were here. I acknowledge that. My name is Vincent Fodera, and I am and I was the owner of several property on just under the viaduct and near the viaduct. Those places, they're well known, still around, and there were 927 Main Street, 928 Main Street, 6, sorry, I forgot all the address that I was in charge for. Now it looks like a long time has gone by. Okay, so 796 Main Street, 209 Union Street, the famous place for the Jimi Hendrix Shrine, 817 Main Street, the ex-Backpackers Hostel, then 28 Main Street, the famous American Hotel. I would say I've been in the area since 1986 for Expo, and I run 3 properties in there as a hostel and rooming house for tourists. It was very hard to bring tourists in the area because it was so run down after the build after the build the viaduct. I would say that was 10 years later. I was there maybe 15 years later. I don't remember Hogan Alley, how it was before. A lot of people talk about. I wish I was there. I wasn't. But I just want to say how bad the area has been since 1980 for the Expo and after the Expo. And under the viaduct was like was bedrooms for homeless, and there were prostitutes advertising $2 sex service under the viaduct, and they had tents, mattress. But what was going on under the viaduct was a lot of crime. There were people getting stabbed, killed. I remember I looked up the window and I could see the ambulance, the police all the time under the viaduct. Never mind the car accidents. So many people got killed in those corners between on the corner of Union and Main Street and Dunsmuir. Finally, they changed the roads. I have counted at least 20 accidents that I've seen the people just almost dead and blood all over the streets and all kinds of things. Never mind that Main Street become like a freeway. So that was the back part of the building of the viaduct to make it so bad that nobody want to be there. When I hear the lady from the Suite Hotel that says keep the viaduct for the tourists, I would say I had 3 businesses in there that I tried to bring the tourists in the area, and I would say that most of the time I fail because of the tourists that thought the viaduct was so creepy and so scary to go there at night that they wouldn't come. As a matter of fact, I moved many years later. Then I had this other property on 796 Main Street, which I discovered later was their grandmother restaurant, the Nora Hendricks restaurant, which Jimi Hendrix grew up in there. And I've been dedicated my last 15 years for that shrine. And I am in favor of the viaduct going down because I can't wait to build a statue for Jimi Hendrix 32 feet tall, because he deserved it. Never mind the community that lived there. He deserved it. He used to play the streets in there. He used to play a guitar outside the Bangara Hotel where the viaduct is now. There used to be a hotel there. He attracted, my shrine has seen so many people, famous musicians coming around from all over the world. And a lot of people say, well, Jimmy deserves something better than this. I say, I know, I deserve a statue. I don't have to wait for federal funds or municipal approval to build a statue. I already had the estimate done for $600,000, a statue made in Italy. It would be cheaper in Canada or in Cuba. And I really like to go ahead with the idea. I know everybody has some issue with the Markham Viaduct. I think the city should give up some of the parks to build a road in there instead of go through the trucks and Prior Street. There's ideas, you know. The old Royal of Europe, you had beautiful gardens and they all become public gardens. So I think the city should give a few parks away. You got too many and it sits empty in the middle of the winter, so they could be used for something else. The other idea is that...
Mr. Fodor, you're out of time.
I'm out of time. That's all I want to say. I can't wait to the viaduct.
I know that
down,
Councillor Ball or Councillor Deal would like to talk to you about the statue idea.
And culture.
Yeah, good. Well, thank you very much for coming.
Okay.
Our next speaker is Dick Helofs.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for your time today. My name is Dick Helofs again. I'm a longtime Vancouver resident, and I've volunteered for many years on the SRA and have been part of the Prior Street Safety Committee since its inception a few years back. This committee was created because most of us in the area feel that the street is extremely unsafe, and we want to do what we can to make it a safer street. There are so many points to talk about today. What I'm here to talk about is the topic of safety on Prior and Venables for now, during the viaduct removal, if you guys all decide to vote for that, and into the future. Unfortunately, with the time restraints, I'll have to read most of my notes just to try to stay on track. We all know 40 years ago, a freeway dropped from the viaducts onto a quiet neighborhood. The residents of East Vancouver have had to deal with these safety issues ever since. A few years ago, because of community pressure, engineering agreed to get involved in figuring out how to make safety improvements on the inadequate road. We in Strathcona and neighboring communities eagerly agreed to help any way we could. We did things like compiling info for the city and consultants, meeting with staff and consultants, surveys of the residents on safety concerns, walks through up and down the corridor with the consultants and City of Vancouver staff. We spent hundreds of hours of volunteer time, and we were led to believe something good would come from this. Something actually good did come from this in the form of a very comprehensive in-service road safety review that explains numerous things that should be done along Prior and Venables to increase safety. Unfortunately, a quote from this report that talks about safety on Prior was used out of context and added to viaduct removal report for you to base your decisions on whether or not these viaducts come down. This is a quote that Alana spoke of earlier. Because of this inaccurate use of this quote, you may get the impression that nothing needs to be done, because it says nothing needs to be done. Even though there are 35 plus pages inside this report, all of Chapter 5, that says improvements that the consultants have talked about and suggested to the city, the engineering department is laying their hat on this report that it's, or this comment that it's actually nothing needs to change. We told engineering about this quote that it may give you the wrong impression in an effort to make sure that you all get the clear picture of findings in the safety review, but nothing was done and your report was not adjusted. We managed to get a small list of 5 items from engineering that they are committing to, things like branch trimming at one corner, signal walk time adjustments at another. These five items don't scratch the surface of the 35 pages of recommendations the consultants are saying they would do. So if they are saying this is the work that is being done, as Councillor Carr mentioned, this is not enough. With the challenges of road closures during construction that engineering spoke of yesterday at the council meeting, there is a very good chance, based on their comments, that traffic could double down Prior Street, down the corridor, for a good part of construction. With road closures, it means the traffic has to go somewhere. Also, with estimates being so far off on the cost to dismantle and build a new roadway, $80 million 2 months ago, $200 million now, we cannot rely on the 10% decrease in traffic on Prior Venables that has been promised after construction. And this south route through the flats that has got everyone so excited is not a done deal yet, so we can't bank on the relieving of safety concerns. Every time city staff talks about it always is, we are going to build it as soon as partners pay up, or it is going to happen if senior government gets involved. Bottom line, the list of improvements that are being offered for that road are inadequate now and for the future. If any of you are not familiar with the safety challenges on Prior and Venable Street, please contact me and we will walk the street together. I'll leave contact information at the clerk's office. I guarantee you will see a good assortment of what we citizens in these small communities that line the street see daily, such as excessive speed, challenges at crosswalks, near misses, aggressive drivers, red light runners, just to name a few. What you won't see is cyclists, families, and pedestrians using the street because we all know it's too dangerous. As I said, we tried working with engineering to make reasonable improvements to get us by until this south connector is done. Based on their lack of response, I worry that they now have stopped working with us. Unfortunately, it looks to me as though they got far enough along their agenda that they don't need us anymore. Hopefully, I'm wrong in this assessment. Today, I'm here to ask that you, our elected officials, instruct them to take a fraction of this now $200 million budget for making everything beautiful and state-of-the-art west of Main and use it to make roads safe for communities east of Main now and in the future. Please instruct engineering to come back to you with a proper list of safety upgrades. They will do and a date when they will be done by. Yep. Yes.
You can bring your opinions here, but it's frowned on to disparage staff or to suggest they've been acting in bad faith.
Okay.
So
sure.
if you could
I apologize to staff for that.
keep that in mind in your comments, that would be appreciated.
Sure, I appreciate that. What I'm asking for is that that the council and mayor ask the engineering to come back to you with a proper list of safety upgrades. They will do and a date when they will be done by. This list should be sent to the citizens group up and down Prior and Venables and add their reasonable input before being returned to mayor and council. Once this list has been finalized, the viaduct vote should happen, not before. This will ensure citizens that you are taking the safety needs into account. Even though these plans...
You're also a minute over, Mr. Helloff, so just wind up, please, okay?
Even though these plans for city building are super exciting for everyone and we all need to take a step back to make sure citizen safety is made a priority and dealt with in the proper way. Again, before council votes and one jackhammer is fired up, we need the list of improvements in place to ensure people in the city are safe. Thank you for your time and sorry for going over time.
Thank you very much. You don't have any questions. Jeff Hicks is next. Sorry. Thanks, Mr. Helloff. Is Jeff Hicks here? Maria Wallstam. Oh, it's sorry, Mr. Hicks is here. Sorry, Ms. Wallstam. That's okay.
Outside. I'll keep it brief because you've heard from a lot of my well-spoken neighbors in Strathcona, and I haven't much to add. I guess it's just that having lived in the area for 12 years with my wife and I, witnessing the street, Prior Street, become quite busy, quite crowded. I'm fearing more for our health than anything. We both are experiencing sort of asthma-related issues that I don't remember ever having. I think it's the amount of heavy buses and machinery, in addition to the large amount of cars, that we find quite alarming. We both are dealing with sort of chronic throat and chest issues. Besides that, it is a very dangerous road. My stepfather was hit on the intersection where we live at Prior at Campbell, and it wasn't very serious, but it was alarming and scary. And then 3 years ago, a car crashed into our house on that corner. You might have seen it, had a bit of a media following. Volkswagen smashed into our house, an altercation on that intersection. We feel that it's mostly a speed issue, and if there could be some remedy to, you've heard all these things before, but speed bumps, mandatory maybe 30K zone, something that would decrease the intensity on that street, because as it is, we lie awake at night and listen to cars going by, and I can only imagine it's 80, 90K. The sound is terrifying. Hearing the intensity that they're going by. So we're nervous about a very bad accident. We've seen many, mostly rear enders, unfortunately some pedestrians hit, and you never get used to hearing that awful thud of a car hitting a body. It is not pleasant. But I think we're ambivalent really about the viaducts, but we're excited about making the street a little safer, a little calmer, because we're worried that either a school kid or we live across from an old age home and they barely make it across that street. In fact, they often don't by the time the lights changes, and we're just so nervous that we're going to see something far worse. So anyways, that's my only comments today.
Thank you for coming, Mr. Hicks. You don't have any questions. Thanks for your comments.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Now, Ms. Wallstam.
I'd just like to ask first if it would be possible to ask add one speaker from the Carnegie Community Action Project. She wasn't able to get on the list.
To do
That's
what?
stretching it. She's also part of the black the black.
To insert her into the list now?
Huh?
To insert her into the list in your place?
Yeah, or after me, or before, or whatever.
No, well, there's a lot of people right after you in the list. I think that, we have to kind of run it in order, so I apologize, but I don't think I can.
I mean, partly it is because I'm concerned about the exclusion of Downtown Eastside residents here. You did schedule this hearing on welfare Wednesday, and 8,000 to 9,000 people in the Downtown Eastside are on welfare, which makes it really hard to come up here today and attend this hearing. So I'm staff at the Carnegie Community Action Project, CCAP. I'm also an organizer with Social Housing Alliance. And I'd like to start with acknowledging that we are on the unceded Coast Salish territories of Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh people. The land we're here to discuss today has a long history of displacement. Initially, one was appropriated by the province from the indigenous people, but also most significantly in 1972, when Hogan's Alley, the first and black community in the city, was destroyed and the predominantly black population that lived there was displaced and dispersed. Stephanie Allen, Daniel Segay, Wade Compton, among others, have elegantly spoken to the violence of this displacement and the lasting effects of it to the present. CCAP is concerned that the plan to remove the viaduct as it currently exists, without any provisions for social housing, will perpetuate this history of displacement on this land. In 2008, Vision Vancouver was elected on the promise that they would end homelessness by 2015. 7 years down the line, there are a record number of people sleeping on the streets every night. Downtown Eastside is the epicenter of this housing crisis. With thousands of people living in inadequate and bedbug-infested SRO hotels, and with over 800 people living on the streets or in shelters on any given night. Last year, 648 new social housing units opened throughout the city. And 458 of these units were used to house homeless people. This is far from enough to address the housing needs in the community and in the city, but it is something. Even though all these new units opened up and 458 homeless people moved into them, homelessness numbers in Vancouver only went down by 57. The consistently high numbers of people sleeping on the streets is partly because there's a lack of a protection for existing affordable housing. Low-income people across the city, and especially in the Downtown East Side, are continuously evicted and displaced by rising rents for evictions and demolitions of existing affordable housing. In the Downtown East Side alone, over 300 affordable SRO rooms were lost to gentrification in 2014. Next year, according to the city, only 45 social housing units that's affordable to people on welfare is set to open. At the same time, the lease on the Quality Inn, which was used to house the Oppenheimer campers, is also set to expire. That's another about 150 units lost. I'm sure you can guess yourself what will happen to homelessness numbers when only 45 social housing units are built in a year, more units are lost, and no additional measures are made to protect the affordable housing stock. In the midst of this kind of unprecedented housing crisis, there's this plan now to remove the viaducts. And this would add 2,500 new market units, many of them high-end condominium units, to the Downtown East Side and also to the surrounding areas. It is not rocket science that the removal of the viaducts will accelerate the gentrification of the Downtown East Side, the loss of low-income housing in the area, and the displacement and dispersal of the low-income community in the Downtown East Side. Yet despite the pressure the removal of the viaduct will have on the SRO hotels and on the affordable housing, the current plan does not contain any provisions for a single unit for social housing. Social housing is not even mentioned once in the report to council. According to the staff report, the plan is to build 200 to 300 so-called affordable housing units. And I mean, you came up with a new definition of affordable housing, but I'm going to repeat it anyways. According to the city, anything that rents below 1,443 per month for a studio, 1,517 for a one-bedroom qualifies as affordable housing. This is far out of range for most working class people in the city, and more importantly, for the many people on welfare who live in the surrounding area and who only receive $610 a month, of which at least $375 goes towards rent. I'm going to wrap up here. And so while CCAP, we oppose the current plan, we believe that it's important that any future planning process is inclusive of former Hogan's Alley residents, their descendants, and Vancouver's Black community groups. It also needs to include the voices of low-income community in the downtown east side, which are currently at risk of being displaced. So taken together, the plan as it currently exists is likely to perpetuate the history of displacement on this land. The viaducts are testament to the past injustices perpetuated by the city, and this should be an opportunity to learn from the past instead of repeating mistakes over again. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Councillor DiGenova?
Thank you very much for coming. Just before I ask my first question, I would like to let you know that unless everyone speaks very quickly, it looks like we will also be having another day that people can come to speak. So, and I believe that's on a Tuesday. That's next Tuesday. So hopefully that will make it easier.
It's Thursday, no?
I'm pretty sure it's the 27th. Maybe the chair will be able to clarify that, but it just hopefully that will offer the accessibility to certain people who couldn't be here today to be here. So if you could pass.
They're actually here. They're just not on the list.
Okay. Well, they can add themselves to the list and they can speak, and yeah, hopefully they'll have a chance to do that. A question I have is, I understand you sort of, it echoed the thoughts of some of the other speakers we heard about the idea of having a study on the effects of gentrification before we sort of move forward with the viaducts. Is that something you're proposing? And also, if you don't mind clarifying, and again, I just want to mention you don't have to answer my question or any other councillor's questions. Are you for or against the removal of the viaducts, or would you just like some more?
Well, I'm against the current plan.
Okay, you're against the current plan.
I mean, if you promise to build 100% social housing, I'd probably be for it.
And by social housing, you mean housing at core need at the $375 a month? Or?
Yeah, that's affordable to people on welfare. Unfortunately, that's not the definition of social housing in the city of Vancouver because it was watered down last year. So it's like $875 or something like that.
Yeah. The Hills limits, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
More questions, Ms. Wellstone, from Councillor Carr this time.
Yes, thank you. That was one of my questions. So thank you so much for coming. And I do have a second question, and that is the statement that you asked if we could protect the current affordable housing in the area, such as in Chinatown. How would you recommend that we do that?
Well, I think it would be good to engage with CCAP and the SRO collaborative around this. There were some changes to the SRA bylaw made this summer, but it's not strong enough because a lot of times, you know, tenants are evicted before they apply for a renovation, like a renovation permit. So it doesn't change that. There need to be even stronger penalties. And there needs to be, you know, more inspection of the SRO hotels so they're, you know, the standards of maintenance are kept up.
Okay, so, okay, that's clear.
But I just want to say about a social impact study of gentrification. I didn't respond to that first question from
Councillor DiGenova.
But I mean, there has been a social impact study. It's done of the Downtown East Side local area plan. I'm not sure another one is needed. I think it's pretty clear what's happening in the neighborhood, and you know, the reports indicate every year how many housing units are lost. So I think it's just a question of going from words to action to actually protect this housing and actually build more social housing. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Ms. Wellstone, I have one question. If the council rejects the proposal that staff's put in front of us, then you realize Concord would still have the right to develop more units on its remaining lands, right?
Yeah, but they wouldn't be able to develop that land under the viaducts, right?
Well, they have about, according to the report, the amount of land they have available for development remains about the same, whether we leave the viaducts or take them away and replace them with something else. So the question is, I take your point on social housing. It's been a really big problem, but the there are other benefits to removing the viaducts, including opening the opportunity of housing affordability on Main Street and so on. So,
But it says in the report it would open up 7 acres of Concord Pacific land.
well, city lands that could be used for whatever the city decides. But Concord's, the report's quite clear that Concord's area remains virtually the same, even slightly smaller.
Okay, thanks for clarification.
Thanks very much. And our next speaker is Harold Lavender. You can bring the podium down a bit, Mr. Lavender, if you find it uncomfortable. The button's on the right there.
Okay, yeah, I'd also like to acknowledge we're on unceded coast territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations, and I think we're getting into actually what the consequences of a particular action are, because in fact, what we're concerned about is in fact what's actually going to happen when the viaducts are turned down, and will that be beneficial? I mean, it may well be beneficial for some people. I mean, and particularly, I think it will. There's a lot of, I should say there's a lot of public money being involved here, which it's a question of what that public money is being used for and who will benefit. I actually think it will allow a big, large-scale development take place, and the developers will certainly benefit a great deal from this decision, but it's not so clear about other people, and it's particularly not so clear about people who live in the surrounding area like I do, very close to where this is going to happen. And I think there are a few different concerns. I mean, first concern is basically around, but particularly what are the city lands going to be used for? And basically, I mean, if you look at Olympic Village, there was a lot of broken promises and failures around making that area for social housing, and I really fear the city's going to make the same mistake again in terms of a massive housing crisis. You're basically not, for a lot of low-income people, they won't even be able to afford to live there, so you're creating an exclusive area in which people who don't make a living wage can't live. And I don't think that's very healthy for the city, and I do think you have an opportunity to actually do something that could actually address the housing crisis for low-income people. But if you just leave it to the market forces, that's not going to happen. There'll either be, most of the condominiums will be relatively high rents, and and the affordable housing is not affordable for a lot of people in Vancouver. So I think to us that's a very crux issue. I mean, it's also true that I'm concerned about what's happening in Chinatown already, and I think the spillover effect will actually encourage the kind of, it's already changing to the detriment of the character of the neighborhood and to the low-income residents who live there. And I think this will just accelerate that a great deal. I see all these plans to build condominiums sprouting up, and it's really, I don't think that's going to preserve the character of the neighborhood, and I think there will be a big spillover effect into Chinatown, which won't be good for seniors and other people on low incomes. And I also think the market rents are going to go up, and in fact that's also going to facilitate the changes in the area. So essentially you're creating a kind of potentially a new zone of exclusion, which is really not going to benefit low-income communities or address the housing crisis. And I mean, there's other issues as well. I mean, where is the spillover traffic going to go? I mean, just more traffic on streets like Hastings, or, I don't know, but I mean, that's also a cost. I mean, there's transportation issues like, Main Street's already a bottleneck, or you're just going to make it, I mean, so that's a big issue to me if you don't provide enough public transportation. I mean, there's the issue of construction, because I am also an asthmatic, and it's going to be a bit of a nightmare for me with the tremendous amount of construction going on, and also just the facilities we might need in terms of parks, schools, daycares, and stuff like that. So I really think if you, I mean, there is a big cost to tearing them down, and I'm not sure it's worth it from my perspective. But if you do, I mean, at least provide a neighborhood that respects some of the heritage that's important in terms of the Black community being displaced, and just I don't really want to see another market-driven Yaletown. I don't think that's really it's kind of a wasted opportunity in lots of ways in terms of what a neighborhood could be. And so I really think you need to consider these areas. And I'm not at all happy with the plan the staff report is coming up with. And so I think just to tear it down, and we'll see about the consequences, is just a waste. And I don't want you to disrespect some of the historic character of the neighborhood and the Black community. So I think you should go back to the drawing board a bit.
Thanks, Mr. Lavender. Phoenix Winters.
Thank you. So my name is Phoenix Winter, and I want to acknowledge that I'm on the territories of the Musqueam, the Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish people, and I'm grateful to be allowed to be here on those territories. And as we speak about land that concerns those people as well, I want to talk about the low-income community. And as Harold said before, there's plans that seem to turn the area under the viaducts into another Yale town. And we've heard a lot of promises before. I know people have been waiting for a park at Creekside for many, many years. And the city is promising a park under the viaducts as well. And it would be nice to actually see some things happen. So I'm also representing the Carnegie Community Action Project, and we're against the plan as it stands. And I've heard developers say that, oh, I don't think we can get rid of the social housing in the neighborhood, in the downtown east side and that area, but there's a real onslaught on social housing right now. And people that are on welfare rates, which are 8,000 to 9,000 people on welfare in the downtown east side, have fewer and fewer places where they can afford to live. When you're only given $375 for the shelter rate, or you're on a pension and you can't afford rates like $14.43 for a studio, then building this housing so close to the low-income community of the downtown east side is going to have a huge effect. And it's also going to affect Chinese seniors as well, because there's a lot of Chinese seniors housing in the neighborhood as well. And we've seen the effect of Woodwards. When there's actually been social housing included, it's taken away more housing than we've gained, because of the effect of higher property values and higher rents being able to be charged. And it's really a good chance to sit and think, what effect is this going to have on the neighborhood? I know it's not a neighborhood that has a lot of money, and people say, where's the money going to come from? But there were plans to build a city social housing on Expo Boulevard, and like Yaletown, people got upset about it and said, we don't want that in our neighborhood. And what's to say that this neighborhood isn't going to be the same way if the viaducts go down? What attitudes are people going to have to their low-income neighbors? And there's also going to be security moving in, and security doesn't like people like us that hang around in the streets because we've got nowhere else to go. And there's talk about greening the Carroll Greenway so that Pigeon Park doesn't exist, and that's people's homes, and people spend time there and interact with each other because there aren't the places to do that. Like, luckily the Carnegie's, there's a living room, but we've got Sequel 138 moving in, and we see the effect of these gentrifying condos that come in, and the people that come in and expect that they bought the condo, and they don't realize the low-income community has been part of it for a long time. This comes with the territory that you're buying in. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was the skateboard park, which is also something where a lot of youth come to, and I know they're trying to relocate the skateboard park, but people also sleep there, and they're also saying, like, there's nowhere else for us to go, so we have to sleep in this skateboard park. And we know that the viaducts were built with rocks so that people couldn't sleep under the bridges to make it really uncomfortable for people, but it's really time to rethink, how are we going to help people, the community of the downtown east side, the people of the downtown east side, the people on welfare that are already so stressed with all the pressures that are on them, and what can we do? Like, build social housing, and that's something the city can do on the lands that it has. Instead of giving them up or leasing them, they can actually build social housing for the people that need it. So that's basically what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have no questions, but thanks for coming down. Patsy McMillan.
Sorry, I'm moving a little slow. I had a knee replacement.
Welcome.
So good evening, and my name is Patsy McMillan. I'm the co-chair of the False Creek Residents Association. As a community association, the False Creek Residents Association is not against the removal of the viaducts per se, but there are many questions yet to be answered. First and foremost is the Creekside Park extension. This park, which includes the completion of the Northeast False Creek seawall, was a contractual obligation of Concord Pacific in the original development plan for North False Creek in 1990. This much-needed park has been consistently delayed by shifting the parameters of that responsibility. Now the responsibility and the possibility have been shifted to the removal of the viaducts. The report before you is attempting to get community buy-in by making yet another promise of 13.75 acres instead of the 9.06 acres that is already part of the contractual agreement. Those 13.75 acres now include the land under the viaduct, previously allocated to youth hard surface recreation, as proposed in the 2009 Northeast False Creek Directions for the Future, as well as the closure of Carroll Street to north-south traffic, effectively renaming that area Park Space, and the new cycling pedestrian bridge to Dunsmuir Street, all of which will presumably be concrete, not green space, albeit painted green. We still have questions about the authenticity of the increased park space. Page 18 of the report shows a slightly extended green space to the north, which was already designated, as I said before, in 2009 as youth recreation space, with a large chunk of land in the northwest corner of what was previously the park site, now given over to development. In the 2011 reconfiguration of the park space, it shows approximately the same northwest section for development, but the exchange was an extension of green space at the southern edge of Lot 6C, which would facilitate the most toxic soils remaining in situ and thereby perhaps expediting the park delivery and the inclusion of so much contaminated soil in the park site overall. The report now says there will be an early phase-in of the seawall. If it is possible now to provide a completed seawall, why hasn't it been possible before? The timeline for the park, as stated in the Viaducts report, is 2025. It's 35 years, a reasonable time to wait for a park. That date should stand alone as a harbinger of further delays. Waiting another 10 years is not expediting the park, nor is that what the community would consider to be an early delivery. There is no sunset clause for the completion of the park attached to this proposal. The FCN ODP adjustments in 2004 stated that the park will be delivered when the last of Concord's sites is completed. Now there is a corollary that states that Concord Pacific will have to compensate the province for the extra density that they will get in this project. Does this mean that they can stop short of the completion and thereby delay the park delivery even further? In order to not have to pay the province, does this mean that all 2.5 million square feet of development has to be completed? Will this or could this extend beyond 2025? You as a council have an opportunity to do the right thing by moving a motion with an end date or a sunset clause for the complete delivery of the park to the city. The FCRA does not think it is unreasonable to ask for a definitive answer to that question. We would like to see a commitment from City Council. We would like to have City Council truly expedite the early delivery of the park by encouraging the immediate rezoning of the land with the most contaminated soils so they can be excavated and remediated so the park can be delivered prior to the completion of the 2,500 new residential units. We think we've waited long enough. City building has to include the existing communities, their health, well-being, and the livability of the area as a whole. City building is not just bricks and mortar, but the people who live there. We still don't know if there's a traffic plan for north-south arterial streets like Abbott, Carroll, and Quebec streets, other than the plan to close Carroll Street to north-south traffic. There are still ongoing concerns re-traffic in the 100 and 200 blocks of Prior Street and beyond. The city has promised that there will be 8-meter setbacks to take the pressure of the new traffic pattern off the residents who now live in those blocks. The residents never expected to have to contend with 6 lanes of traffic outside their front door. There needs to be assurances that this will be mitigated as promised. For anyone who lives here, we see the huge volumes of traffic sitting bumper to bumper on both arms of the viaduct, especially the Dunsmuir viaduct during rush hour, and most importantly when there are concurrent events at the stadia or on the park site, i.e. Cirque du Soleil. It is unfortunate that there's still many unanswered questions. Will we be looking at a wall of condo towers separating our neighborhoods rather than the viaducts, which we can still see over and walk under? The SkyTrain will still come down to grade. And right at the end.
Yep.
The northern edge of the park will remain a divisive component between neighborhoods, as will a 6-lane roadway, which will need to accommodate the 40,000 vehicles currently using the viaducts, as well as the 22,000 vehicles using the surface roads, not to mention new residents. Perhaps if we were to see Creekside Park first, we would be able to wholeheartedly support this venture. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carr has some questions for you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much, Ms. McKellan, for coming today and all your work. So in terms of questions, I'd like to start with what is in recommendation F about the delivery of the park, and I'll go over that with you. But to be clear, the delivery of the park was tied to a commitment that you said was in 1990, 25 years ago, and was based on a rezoning, right? The rezoning or the development
based on the rezoning of 7,650 units. Now there's 11,511 units.
Okay.
Without any increase in park space.
Okay, different point, and I'll get to that. But the rezoning of Concord Pacific's lands in Lot 6C, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm worried about this wording, and I want to bounce this off you and see if you're okay with it. The wording in recommendation F says that the rezoning of 6C, Concord's lands in 6C, the rezoning results in the delivery of part or all of the new waterfront park on an expedited basis. My understanding was the rezoning triggers the delivery of all of the park. Am I incorrect on that?
I think in 2004, that was changed when they said when either 6A or 6C was rezoned, it triggered the delivery of the park. And that was changed to read when either 6A or when 6A and 6C, whichever is the last of these to be completed, triggers the park. So you've got two different commodities there.
Right.
Is it when all of the 2.5 million square feet is built out? Or is it when it's rezoned for the first portion of that?
Right. Okay, so thank you for that clarification. I know you know the history.
Too well.
So then it would be within that 2004 change to say that Concord Pacific can deliver part of the waterfront park after 6C is rezoned. Is that?
If they chose to do so.
Right. All right. So you're looking for a timeline. You're looking for an actual date. The date right now in this report is the end date, not the beginning of what might be expedited, but the end date's 2025.
Yeah, that's what was stated at the joint working group meeting last week, was 2025.
Okay. And that's inadequate from your perspective? Or is it just that you want that firm and embedded in this report?
We would like something out there to say it has to be completed by this date. Otherwise, it can be continually delayed for one reason or another, just as it has been so far.
Got it. And in terms of the expedited basis, that there's in this recommendation, it talks about part or all of the new park being developed on an expedited basis. Is there
What does
any?
that mean?
Well, I'm asking you what you would like it to mean.
Sooner rather than later, but they've been talking about their early delivery of Creekside Park now since I've been here.
Yes.
About 14 years.
Is it all? Are you also looking for a date to be embedded on that?
Sorry,
A date rather than expedited basis wording.
a sunset clause.
A sunset
A
clause.
sunset clause where they say, you know, as they've done in George Wayneborn Park and David Lamb Park, when the 500th unit is built, the park is delivered. When the 600 unit, whatever, you've got 2,500 units. If you have a year and a half per building to build those buildings, you're looking at probably what, 15 to 20 buildings.
So this is actually, the statement is clear. It says that when the rezoning happens, not even when the rezoning is done, but when the rezoning happens, it says that the rezoning results in the delivery of part or all of the new waterfront park.
But it will depend on when they get the contaminated soils out of what area has been rezoned. Like I know Mr. Alexander said that the area on 6C that has got the most contaminated soils will become park. But if you look at the diagram on page 18 of the report, that all of 6C and into part of the northwest corner of Lot 9 is all developable land. It is not the area where it has the most toxic soils, the special waste on the southern portion of 6C. That is not going to be park. That might be part of the promenade to the wharf.
Yes.
But it is not. So if they were to leave that in situ, then that soil, 20,000 cubic meters of toxic soil that has to come out of there, would be able to stay in place.
Right.
And that was part of the reconfiguration of the park in 2011.
Okay.
That was part of the thinking around that.
What would be helpful
Councillor
to
Carr,
me?
you're well over time.
Can I just finish this one last?
Well,
Very
Councillor
short. What would be helpful to me is if you had wording that would satisfy the False Creek Residents Association for that recommendation.
You want it right now?
No, but
No, at some point. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Affleck?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll keep it short because I know we have a bunch of speakers that we want to get to before 6. But I mean, Councillor Carr has sort of addressed most of the issues. I guess the question, park first is clearly what you want, park first. But from the new design, though, if you've seen this sort of new look and the new configuration as a neighbor and as a resident of that area, what are your thoughts? Do you prefer the new one, or do you care, or?
I don't have an opinion one way or the other as to the configuration of it now. It's changed so many times over the last 10 years that I don't know that would be the final configuration at this point. Right. I do know that to us, that's not an increase in park space. It's only connecting what was already proposed in the 2009 directions for the future for Northeast False Creek, the area under the viaducts for recreation, for youth under there, as well as not all of the 9 acres, because there's a piece cut out of that for
we heard one of your neighbors earlier there who spoke, who had.
Yeah. So the other pieces of that 13.75 acres, we don't really know where that's coming from. Okay. Are they including that seawall, the riprap, as John Murray said, the promenade, the wharf, the Dunsmuir bike path, the closing of,
we'll be asking for clarification
what exactly is that increase?
Okay. And I think we'll be asking about that. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Very much. That's all your questions. I just was advised by the clerk that Joe Weiss would prefer actually to come on the 27th. So we're getting close to the end. We'll do what we can up to that point. But if your number is after 34, there's a high probability we won't be able to speak to you today. So, and there may be some issues in between there. So Eric Wilson, is Eric Wilson here? Eric? Pardon me? Oh, we didn't, no, sorry, Cam is withdrawn, sorry. Yeah, number 28 withdrew. Eric Wilson? Not seeing any reaction to that. Beth McLaren? Cottonwood Gardens? Is Beth McLaren here? Or Len Kidd from Cottonwood Community Gardens? Looks like this could be Mr. Kidd coming our way.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm a community gardener at Cottonwood, and I want to express my concerns about the viaduct removal project. One consequence of the proposal is the selection of a new route, arterial route, through the False Creek Flats. Despite the reassurances that the selection of our new route will not be decided at this time, I think that it is a mistake to consider viaduct removal without thinking of its costs in terms of damage to the community that it may bring. I've been involved in carefully following the planning process for a number of years now through the downtown east side planning process and through the False Creek Flats planning process. And in all our meetings and conversations with city planners and engineers, the subtext has always been that Malkin is the preferred route. Pryor has been taken off the table. Williams has never been a serious option. And National, we've been told, has too many disadvantages and is too costly. It looks to me that if you decide to take the viaducts down, you have already decided that the route de facto will be Malkin. If Malkin is the new arterial, it will damage Cottonwood in a number of serious ways. Cottonwood is a long, narrow garden strung along Malkin. At best, noise and pollution will penetrate every part of the garden. At worst, we fear that engineering has been overly optimistic in their hopes that Malkin can be an arterial without being widened and without serious damage to the garden or produce row. And between the planning and the design stage, it will be evident that Malkin will have to be widened, and so the garden will be back to our initial concerns, that the garden will lose land, plots, bird habitat, and valuable plants. The spokesman for Produce Row has been quoted in the Vancouver Sun as saying that if Malkin is chosen as the arterial, they will have to move. For these reasons and more, we ask that serious consideration of an alternative route, preferably national, be taken before making the decision on viaduct removal. Thank you.
You have a question from Councillor Affleck. Hold over? Okay. You have a question for me, Mr. Kidd. When we started into this conversation a few years ago,
yes.
Yeah, I'm over here. I researched the website, and the garden was built deliberately or with full knowledge that it was partly on the right of way. Is that right? Yeah. So has the garden leadership talked about any way to, I mean, rights of way are a pretty serious deal in the world of the city, as are community gardens. Has the community garden group talked at all about any way to facilitate a solution that would be good for the garden and maybe help Produce Row and Strathcona?
Well, I've been down on Malkin at least 2 days a week for the last 20 years.
Could you speak a bit closer to the mic?
Sorry. I've been down on Malkin for at least 2 days a week for the last 20 years, and I can't see rush hour traffic going down Malkin without seriously impacting Produce Row. Now, the garden would be a completely different place if we were not a backwater and we were on a major arterial. But if the garden loses land and plots and valuable plants to an arterial, that's one thing. If you destroy Produce Row with 1,000 relatively good entry-level jobs or low-skill jobs, that's quite another thing. I think that making a decision that impacts an area as big as this new arterial without completing the False Creek planning process is a mistake.
Well, I think I would say that I haven't heard anyone quarrel with your assessment of the importance of Produce Row. Right. And I haven't heard anyone suggest that there be no further planning. And we've had Ms. Chow earlier suggest that the current situation is quite bad for Produce Row because they have to basically cut off the road as it stands. So the question is this: is there any solution in your mind that the community garden could come to the table with? And suppose the council decides not to tear down the viaducts. The status quo is still quite poor for Produce Row. Is there any middle ground at all?
Well, Williams has been suggested, swapping parkland for a route to the park. That would take the pressure off both Malkin, Produce Row, Community Garden, and Pryor. Now, it would be a hard sell in a city that values park space as it does, but that might be an option. Certainly, national is an option in our minds. It's more costly. You would have to do it quickly so the new hospital can configure around whatever proposal you have to make. Any designs that would affect national. But I can't, even if you widened Malkin into the Cottonwood, I can't see Produce Row living with arterial traffic outside their front gates.
Okay, thanks very much. Oh, Councillor Carr, do you have a question now? Okay.
Much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming and
Thank you.
all the work you do. Oh, excuse me. I have a question.
I was caught off guard too, Mr.
So what you've asked, which is that a decision to bring down the viaducts not occur unless there's a decision made first on the alternative route to Pryor.
Yes.
Although I have to say, I asked for that a year and a half, 2 years ago. That's not what's going to happen. We've got the southeast, the False Creek Flats planning process going on. There's embedded in this report a commitment that there will be an alternate route found. So I'm asking if there's any wording that would give you some confidence that the impacts on Cottonwood and on the Produce Row would be none or minimal. That if that would give you some comfort level around the fact that the decision will be made on the viaducts prior to the False Creek Flats decision on the road itself, but there could be embedded conditions.
I can't think of any reassurances you could give me that if you take the bikes down and you hold to your commitment that Pryor is not going to be the arterial route. Personally, I can't see why Pryor is any different than First Avenue or 12th Avenue or Cambie or Granville. But if you hold to your commitment that Pryor is going to be calmed, then I see bad things for the garden and for Produce Row. And I can't think of anything reassurances you can make me.
Well, perhaps our staff and the community that's doing the planning can be incredibly innovative.
Well, you've heard from Produce Row that they couldn't live with an arterial there. And you've heard from us that we couldn't live with an arterial there. So something's got to give, right? And one of the problems I have with the whole planning process is the denial of the impacts up front. You want to delay the decision on the arterial route to get the viaduct removal process approved. You're not facing up to the consequences, and you're not telling the city, the citizens of the city of the consequences of the decision to take the viaducts down. It's much the same as the woman who was speaking about the impact on the poor people in the downtown east side. It's inevitable if the land values go up down there that those people are going to be under more and more pressure. But it comes nowhere in your report. It comes nowhere in your considerations. The same thing I think is happening with the new arterial route. You're pretending the consequences won't be there. You're pretending you can ameliorate them.
But this is an iterative process where we're listening to you and we're listening to the individuals who come to express their concerns with the opportunity to modify the recommendations in order to address those concerns. That is what this process is about. Okay.
You want a recommendation?
Yes.
I would recommend that you price out a long, I don't know how would, elevated roadway along National. Ask the railroads to allow you to build an elevated roadway across some of their tracks and use that as an arterial. You're not taking land away from anybody else.
Price out an elevated roadway along.
Well, the engineers are telling
National?
us.
Did you say National?
The engineers are telling us that National has a number of serious problems that don't make it a very attractive option.
Right.
They're saying that the elevated portion to get over the tracks would have to be 3 or 4 times as long as the one on Malkin, right? Adding significant costs. They also say that the T connection at night is a problem, and the route through the hospital grounds at the other end is a problem. So if the only 2 options are Malkin and National, then you should really price out National and know what you're looking at and decide whether you can afford to kill Produce Row or you have to go and find more money to put it on National.
Okay.
So seriously look at National before you make a decision.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Kidd. Okay, we're pretty close to our stopping time. Is Amy Clift here? Amy Clift? Rosemary Larson? Hi, Ms. Larson. You're going to be our last speaker, and we have a hard stop at 6 o'clock. So I just want to flag that for you. If you only get 5 minutes, and you may have questions, so you might have to come back if you don't get questions. We are going to stop at 6. That was the plan. So fire away, and I just want to let you know I don't want to disadvantage you in any way, but if you do have many questions, you'd have to come back on the 27th.
I might not get any questions. That's what you're telling me.
Well, you could get them on the 27th, but they won't be answered tonight, or they won't be asked tonight, probably.
Is it better that I come back and speak on the 27th?
It's your call. You're welcome to start.
Is it my call?
Yeah, if you want to come back and start on the 27th.
Well,
I'm fine with that.
if there's an issue of me not getting no questions today, if I speak today, and coming back on the 27th and speaking with the opportunity to have a conversation, I think I'll pick
I'm
the
not
second
guaranteeing you any questions on either scenario.
Sorry?
I can't guarantee you any questions, even though Councillor Carr is very active on the button.
But you said there's no chance of questions today, but there's a chance of questions next time.
Yeah, you can get the questions either way, but you might have to come back on the 27th if you want to
I
start.
think I'd like to have the questions and answers on the same day.
Okay.
So with your permission, I will.
Yeah, the clerk follows us for us very
27th.
closely. So why don't you come back on the 27th at 4 o'clock, and we'll start with you.
I will. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
And sorry for this You didn't quite get there, but I tried, and I appreciate your patience and your
I tried to.
understanding. And we will now recess this meeting and reconvene on October the 27th, 2015 at 4 p.m. And we will now reconvene in regular council to perform one little bit of business, so at least 6 of us have to stay behind to help the mayor through that part. Sorry. There we go. There we go.
Okay, we will now convene in regular council to deal with the recommendations and actions from today's standing committee on City Finance and Services meeting. Madam Clerk, may we have the roll call, please?
Yes, we have Mayor Robertson in the chair. Councillor Louis is not in the chamber. Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Deal. Councillor Jang is on leave of absence. Councillor Reimer not in the chamber. Councillor Meigs.
Here.
Councillor Ball. Councillor Carr.
Here.
Councillor Affleck. Councillor DeGenova. You have a quorum, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And this is specifically to deal with item 4, which was adopted on consent. For that, we need a motion to adopt the standing committee's recommendations. For item 4, Councillor Stevenson will move, and seconder for that. Seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. And that's what we needed to do. We can recess this meeting and reconvene following the reconvened standing committee meeting on City Finance and Services meeting, which will be on Tuesday, October the 27th, 4 p.m. We are adjourned, recessed. Thank you.